Chapter 172. Outside the window, the night sky became darker. Fog filled the air and even the temperature in the room dropped a little. When Qin Xiaodong came over with the hot tea, he saw that young Master Qin was tutoring his young master in physics. His face was filled with indescribable shock. He really didn't expect his young master to learn. Young Master Qin seemed to be different from what he had imagined. At first, he thought that young Master Qin was here to catch his young master and make him into meat dumplings. But now it seemed that young Master Qin treated his young master quite well. For some reason, Qin Xiaodong thought of that kiss again and shook his head. He must have seen it wrong. Although he had never kissed before, he knew what it was like. With how calm his young master and young Master Qin were, nothing should have happened. Here. Qin Mo saw that the young man's attention was on the hot tea, so he pulled the back of his head and knocked on the paper on the table with his slender fingers. Dressed in a black suit and a double-breasted coat, he looked like a warlord's young master from the Republic of China period. His side profile was handsome and elegant. Fu Jiu didn't listen to him. Instead, she put down the carbon pen in her hand. She raised her arm and put it on Qin Mo's shoulder. She turned her head and laughed lightly in his ear. "Brother Mo, what do you think of my little housekeeper? He's been watching you since the beginning. I don't know about your little housekeeper, but I do know that if you insist on talking to me in this position, I will hang you outside the window and let you breathe in the haze of Jiang City." The low and hoarse voice was neither slow nor slow, with a suppressed coldness. Even his eyes were heavy. "Put your paws down." Qin Xiaodong's soul had left his body after seeing this scene before he left. What was going on? Young master. How dare he get so close to young Master Qin? So close, as if they could kiss. After Qin Xiaodong went out, he didn't leave immediately. Instead, he paused in front of the door and glanced at the closed door. As if she had seen through his expression, Fu Jiu also walked out. She raised her eyebrows and looked at him. "Why are you standing here instead of getting tea and snacks?" "Young master." Qin Xiaodong grabbed Fu Jiu's arm and pulled her to the side. It wasn't easy for him to speak, so he raised his voice and said anxiously, "Young master, tell me, have you not given up on sleeping with Almighty Qin? I was wondering why young master suddenly became so fond of studying today. It turns out that you have ulterior motives. You purposely let young Master Qin tutor you so that you can have a chance to get close to Almighty Qin. It's getting late and you can let him sleep. Am I right?" At that moment, Fu Jiu didn't know how to refute. After all, the other reason she came out was to ask Qin Xiaodong to prepare a guest room for the Almighty to sleep in. "Young master, listen to me once and give up on this idea." Qin Xiaodong was anxious. "With your physique, you can't sleep with Almighty Qin." When Fu Jiu heard this, her thin lips curled up and she smiled devilishly. "Who says I can't sleep with Almighty Qin? It's just a small case, all right?" Just then, small case? I didn't know I was so easy to sleep with in your mind. Chapter 173. Almighty Qin. Qin Xiaodong looked at the tall figure that appeared at the door, and his voice trembled with fear. He only had one thought in his mind, and that was that his young master was dead meat this time. Fu Jiu was a little stunned. How could she be so precise? If she said something big, the Almighty would definitely appear. Were all people who studied psychology so good at predicting? Qin Mo lifted his eyelids casually. "Why aren't you talking? Did a cat bite your tongue? I want to hear how you are going to sleep with me." Fu Jiu turned her head, and her pupils were very serious. "I was wrong." Qin Mo crossed his arms in front of his chest, looked the young man up and down and said coldly, "Come in." Fu Jiu put her hands in her pockets and smiled carelessly, looking a little devilishly handsome. Qin Xiaodong pulled her back. "Young master, why don't we call the police? Will young Master Qin kill you?" Fu Jiu laughed. "Don't worry, the Almighty will at most get a rope and hang me outside to breathe in the smog. I'm good at fighting. Go cook some supper first so I can still eat something before I get hung up." Qin Xiaodong. He was very seriously worried, okay? Even now, his young master was still in the mood to joke around. Why was his young master so daring? That was young Master Qin, the one who could crush a person as easily as crushing an ant. As soon as Fu Jiu walked into the room, Qin Mo held her wrist, lowered her body and said in a low voice, "Tell me, should I hang you on a tree branch or let you run 10 laps outside?" "Neither is good." Fu Jiu's face was always so handsome and clean that it was hard to concentrate. She smiled, showing her canine teeth. "I'm so handsome, what if the smog makes my eyes inflamed? I won't be able to pass my exams and I won't be able to play games." Then I won't be able to be in the same team as Brother Imo. Chin Imo looked at that harmless, fair and handsome face in front of him, and thought about it carefully. With such a face, it would indeed be a little inappropriate to stare at a pair of red rabbit eyes. But having eyes inflamed had its benefits. At least it could reduce this guy's public nuisance. If he was any crueler, he would definitely throw this kid out, regardless of whether his eyes were inflamed or not. However, since he had already been raised by him as a younger brother, he had to take good care of him. If he went out looking sickly, he would be the one to lose face. You have a lot of excuses. Chin Imo let go of the youngster. The remaining moisture on his fingertips made him frown. As expected, he wasn't manly enough. Fujio didn't say anything. She took the opportunity to return to her original seat and continued to hold her pen in her mouth. She wrote down her multiple-choice questions with a slight smile on her lips. This kind of retreating in order to advance was really effective for the Almighty. He had to use it more often in the future. Just as Fujio was thinking about this, she saw the man walk over, reach out his left hand from behind her, and close the physics book in front of her eyes. His voice was neither cold nor indifferent. That's all for today. Remember a few more formulas tomorrow. Fujio's silver hair stood up a little. Memorizing formulas? A few of them will be tested. The Almighty's tone sounded like he was talking about what he would be eating tomorrow. As a poor student who had just started, Fujio really couldn't understand. Tomorrow he will ask Yao Yao if all of them who are good at physics are like this. Chapter 174. Sleep? The man looked at her and raised his eyebrows. His slender fingers pulled out a few books from the bookshelf and raised them. Have you forgotten these bedtime stories? Fujio paused and her whole body froze. Was he really going to read it? Brother Imo, these novels aren't suitable for bedtime stories. Whether it's suitable or not, it's not up to you to decide. Chin Mo's voice was calm. He pulled out a pack of cigarettes from his suit that didn't have a single wrinkle. He took one out and bit it between his thin lips. He tilted his head and lit it up. I want to listen to it before I sleep today. Fujio, Almighty, you won't be able to make friends if you're so willful. Don't want to read it? Chin Imo chuckled. Or do you want to run 10 laps outside and take in the smog in Jiang City? Fujio reached out and took the book from the man's palm. She smiled. I'm a cultured person, so I should read more books. Are you educated enough to read this kind of book? Chin Imo flicked the youngster's forehead. Fujio narrowed her eyes. Brother Imo, don't look down on our romance novels. Do you know how many girls have fallen in love and how many men have chased each other? At this point, Fujio reached out and put her hand on the man's shoulder. Speaking of which, Brother Imo, you really should read more novels like this. It's good for you to get along with girls. Girls? Chin Mo's voice was neither hot nor cold. He sounded like a forensic doctor doing a professional appraisal. His side profile was still handsome and calm. He reached out to untie his tie, exuding an aura of abstinence. Forget about such a troublesome creature. Maybe some of them are good, but some of them will always do all kinds of things to get close to the rich people in their eyes. I think you have a deeper understanding of this than I do. Fujio knew that he was referring to the mistress, but she said, in my opinion, women who destroy other people's families are despicable, but men who can't resist seduction and abandon their wives and children are equally unforgivable. Surprisingly, the Almighty didn't refute her words. Instead, he said indifferently, that kind of person doesn't deserve to be a man. For the first time, Fujio felt that Chin Imo was someone worth befriending. Even though he was black-bellied, he never used despicable means to deal with people outside of the business world. For example, when it came to her, the man had always been very lenient. Otherwise, with the Chin family's power, they could have made it difficult for her to move around in the entire Jiang City the first time they met. But the man didn't. Just like now, most of the time men in high positions would always blame women when it came to cheating, but they didn't know that the root of the problem was also them. But the Almighty was different. In the Almighty's eyes, a man should be a man. Such a righteous outlook was just like his handsome and noble face, perfect and flawless. As expected, the Almighty was not only suitable as an opponent, but also as a friend. Fujio had regretted exposing her identity as Spade Z too early and not playing more with men. Now that he thought about it, if he could fight side by side with the Almighty, it would definitely be a good thing. Most importantly, the Almighty was rich. But, after this discussion, she was even more certain of one thing. It was best not to let the Almighty know her true gender. Chapter 175. When Fujio raised her eyebrows, there was a smile on the corner of her mouth. No one could tell what she was thinking. She was handsome and all that was left was her handsomeness. In fact, this was the first time Qin Mo had met someone like the youngster. He seemed evil and did things without any rules. But psychologically, this kind of person was the most difficult to profile. Therefore, it was safest to keep such a scourge by his side. Which one should I read first? Fu Jiu looked at the 10 novels in her hands and found it difficult to choose. Qin Mo came back to his senses, his voice deep and pleasant. Read the one you like the most first. It was said that a person's personality could be deduced from the books they read. In the past, Qin Mo had trusted this professional theory, but now, because of the youngster, he started to doubt the complexity of human nature. Looking at the youngster, he didn't seem like someone who read romance novels. In the end, he was dumber than he thought. Fu Jiu really didn't read these kinds of things. She usually liked to read mystery novels, but there were still remnants of these books in her mind. She pulled out a book that she thought was funny, but in fact, it was a rich and powerful school story. This time the Almighty was quite polite. He gestured for her to go ahead. With a demonic elegance, he crossed his legs and lay on her bed. His face was indifferent and handsome. His right hand was still wearing the black glove, revealing his fair wrist. It made people feel like he didn't belong in this world. In the past, Fu Jiu didn't think that her bed was small, but now that this man was lying on it, she felt like she should get a new bed. Speaking of which, the Almighty was too tall. It's a novel in the first person. Fu Jiu coughed softly. It's a school novel for rich families. Qin Mo lifted his thin lips, a little mocking. Where you going, domineering school hunk? Brother Mo, you have a good memory. Fu Jiu leaned over and blinked her beautiful eyes. Qin Mo reached out and pinned the youngster's hat. I asked you to read a bedtime story, not to flirt. My name is Zhang Meili, and I'm a girl that you can see everywhere. Until one day I transferred to a college called the best in the universe, the world, and China, and my dream life began. That day I fainted in the forest while walking. Then someone appeared and he was very handsome. His name is Rich Ouyang. Hearing this, the man probably couldn't help it anymore, and his thin lips hooked up into a sneer. Ouyang is rich? Meh. Brother Mo, don't worry, the story has just begun. So this Ouyang Yuqian is rich. He's none other than the only son of the dean of the most powerful college in China. He knows how to build spaceships and he even has a satellite at home. After he saw me faint, he gave me a pile of gold bricks and told me to buy something to eat. But I'm so kind, cute and pure, how could I take his money? It was Ouyang Yuqian's first time meeting a girl who would reject him like me. From then on he started circling around me. Although there were many people who liked me lining up from my class to the school gate, I couldn't bear to reject him, so I agreed to date him for a few days. Pa Qin Mo reached out his hand and pressed the book in Fu Jiu's hand. His voice was indifferent. Buying food with gold bricks? Are you sure you can buy it? Chapter 176. Qin Mo looked at the youngster in front of him. Normal? Even though I had never read such a novel, I knew that this was not normal. Was it on purpose? How could this be? Fu Jiu didn't admit it. She opened the book calmly and smiled wantonly. Look, this is what's written here. Fantasizing that all men in the world only love their own novels? Qin Mo's slender fingers tapped on the sentence. Although there are many people who like me. They line up from my class to the school gate. His eyes turned cold. Fu Jiu replied lazily, that's nothing. Every time Brother Mo goes to school, the crowd is bigger than this. Even the school leaders line up to see you, so it's not strange. In that instant, Qin Mo felt a little speechless. There was still a smile on Fu Jiu's thin lips. Finally, there was a topic that could make the Almighty choke. She wanted to continue. How could Qin Mo allow the youngster to poison his nerves again? Just hearing the name Ouyang Yuqian made him want to close the book. Looking at the youngster's expression, he arched a brow. Very proud? Nope. Fu Jiu chuckled. She finally knew the weakness of a straight-A student. The Almighty, who studied psychology, couldn't stand Mary Sullivan the most. Qin Mo reached out and pinched the youngster's chin. His eyes darkened. You're smiling so much that your canine teeth are showing. How can you say you're not proud? Li Xiaodong did not expect to see such a scene as soon as he came in. His hand trembled and the bowl fell. He really didn't expect that young Master Qin would teach his young master a lesson by kissing. Qin Xiaodong swallowed hard. That posture was clearly a sign of kissing. What's the matter? What's more, the person asking the question wasn't their young master, but young Master Qin. That kind of devilish and handsome side profile made it easy for people to think the wrong way. No. Qin Xiaodong didn't have much confidence. Then he thought of something and said, My young master asked me to prepare a guest room for young Master Qin. I've already prepared it. Young Master Qin, do you want to rest there? Or wait a bit. Fujio really didn't understand why his little housekeeper was stuttering like baby foam. Was he scared by the Almighty? Guest room? Qin Emo lifted the corners of his eyes. Who said I wanted to stay in the guest room? Qin Xiaodong paused. Where else should I live? I'll share a room with your young master, Qin Emo said casually. Qin Xiaodong's jaw dropped as if he was struck by lightning. Sleep in the same room? What? Is there a problem? Qin Emo held a cigarette between his fingers and flicked it into the ashtray. His gaze was as calm as water as he glanced at him. Qin Xiaodong's heart skipped a beat when he saw that look. He didn't even look at his young master's expression and immediately said, Of course there's no problem. I'll go get another pillow for young Master Qin now. Qin Xiaodong really didn't think that the two of them would sleep together. He felt that it was inappropriate, but he really didn't dare to disobey young Master Qin's order. Most importantly, this was an opportunity for the young master. Chapter 177. Fujio glanced at him with a cold smile. I really have to thank you for your understanding. Starting tomorrow, your salary will be halved. Qin Xiaodong. Why did young master still deduct his salary after he did the right thing? Why? When Fujio threw the quilt on the bed, she felt helpless. She really had a stupid teammate. She had to control the little butler's messy thoughts in the future, or it would be too dangerous. Brother Emo, you can sleep in my room. I'll sleep in the guest room. Fujio turned her head and smiled at Qin Emo. I've been drinking, so I have a strong smell on me. You probably can't get used to it. Qin Emo pulled back the young man who was trying to escape. He grabbed Fujio's arm and pressed him against the wall. His handsome face was so close that there was no room for a third person. What? You don't want to sleep in the same bed with me? Such a straightforward question was a little hard to answer. Any random girl can sleep in your bed. Why can't your brother? Qin Emo said this in a very low voice. There was no warmth in his deep eyes. Fujio was very clear that she had to answer at this moment. Of course. Then wash yourself clean before you go to bed. Don't let me smell any alcohol on you. Or do you prefer to shower with me? Qin Emo didn't wear a tie, and 2 buttons on his shirt were unbuttoned. His black hair matched his handsome and fair face, and his presence was especially strong. He had an extremely lazy expression as if saying, Take your time to choose, I'm not in a hurry. Fujio knew that she couldn't escape this time, so she smiled handsomely. Brother Emo, shower first. I'll make the bed. No matter what, she had to find a thicker quilt, or it would be dangerous. Showers usually didn't take long. When Qin Emo came out, Fujio had almost finished arranging the bed. She deliberately placed a plush toy in the middle to prevent the same situation from happening when she woke up the next morning. The Almighty didn't find fault with her. Fujio took the towel into the bathroom. After locking the door, she began to take off her school uniform and bandages. She took a hot shower, changed her clothes and walked out. His hair wasn't washed, but it was still damp. His messy silver hair would only make people feel that it was luxurious. Fujio didn't like wearing slippers, especially after her shower. She casually stepped on the wooden floor and walked over with a smile on her face. It was an ordinary action, but when she did it, she looked very handsome. A long time ago, Qin Emo had already felt that the youngster was extremely fair. Now, when he looked at the pair of bare feet, they were like porcelain jade. Even his nails had been trimmed to a smooth and glossy sheen. His eyes couldn't help but sink before he shifted his gaze away. After the experience of sharing the same bed last time, Fujio naturally turned off the lights and lay down. He wasn't sure if it was because the lights were off, but the faint aroma of alcohol and the sweetness of the shower gel gradually became clearer with the youngster's breathing. It seemed to brush against his left ear, but the youngster didn't notice. He smiled at him. Brother Emo, do you want me to read you another bedtime story? Chapter 178. Because of this thought, Qin Emo frowned heavily. His dark eyes were so deep that they seemed to reflect the light in the room. Seeing that Qin Emo didn't say anything, Fujio wanted to take a closer look. Unexpectedly, as soon as she moved, the man pressed her down with one hand. He was on top of her, holding her wrist with his fingers, and his breath was a little hot. Except for the faint light outside, it was dark everywhere in the bedroom. That was why Qin Mo's eyes looked even colder and deeper. He was like a vigilant beast, exuding a dangerous and beautiful luster when hunting. The two of them were so close that Fujio could clearly see the excessively long eyelashes on the man's face. He just looked at her, his eyes like the deep well water, tempting her to fall in if she wasn't careful. If you move again you'll get out. Now close your eyes and sleep. His fingers seemed to have exerted a little more force, and even his voice was filled with a deep warning. Then Fujio was pressed against Chinmo's chest. In an instant the man's minty tobacco smell seeped into her nose. It was familiar yet strange. She was half a head shorter than the man, and her eyes fell on his perfect jawline. She could even see his Adam's apple moving slightly when he spoke. Being pressed in the man's arms like this, she really couldn't move around. Luckily, she put a plush toy on the bed which could put some distance between the two of them, but Chinmo only felt that the person in his arms was very soft, like soft cotton candy. Even the smell was so sweet that it made him want to use a little more strength to crush the young man. Even though this thought was wrong, Chinmo couldn't control his intuition. Luckily, the young man was quiet, and the head in front of his chest was very obedient. He was different from all the people he had interacted with before. The young man not only looked good, but also smelled good, so Chinmo didn't dislike this position. Instead, he felt that it was a good way to sleep. Whether it was the touch of his hands or the smell of his breath, they were all good for sleep. The night was getting darker and darker, and it was already dawn. The scene of two equally handsome people sleeping on the bed was very beautiful, especially when Fujio's silver hair contrasted with Chinmo's black hair, creating a stunning effect. If there was a cameraman here, he would definitely take a picture of them. Such a scene would definitely attract countless fans on TV. As the sun rose, Fujio slowly opened her eyes. She reached out and rubbed her left eye. 2 or 3 strands of her silver hair were sticking out. She tilted her head and looked to her side. The Almighty was still sleeping. That face that could turn all living things upside down was noble, elegant, and superbly crafted. He just lay there quietly with his slender hands folded elegantly in front of his chest. His long and thick eyelashes cast a dark shadow, and his entire body exuded an aura of nobility that no one could approach. His slightly curled lips seemed to be filled with indescribable mockery towards them, the slacker students. The more Fujio looked at him, the more she felt that when God was creating things, he must have treated the Almighty as his own son. She reached out her hand wanting to poke the man's bewitching face, but in the next she felt, of something God to say, God and Kim. Chapter 179. Auntie, why did it have to come today? Fujio looked at the blood-stained pajama pants and her eyes darkened. She tore them off and rinsed her body with hot water. Her lower abdomen warmed up, but she couldn't find anything to protect herself with, so she simply folded a layer of soft paper to replace it. But she wasn't sure if the bedsheets were dirty. Fujio looked at herself in the mirror with pale lips and frowned. This thing came at the right time. But she was also glad that it wasn't when the Almighty was tutoring her yesterday. Otherwise, she would have been caught red-handed and she would have been in deep trouble. Fujio pulled out the skincare products on the side, took out a stick of men's lip balm, and applied it on her lips, just to make herself look less pale. Fujio's face was pale, but she didn't look as pale as before. At this moment, Chinmo opened his cold and deep eyes because of the noise in the bathroom. He lifted the quilt and narrowed his eyes. What's this? Bloodstains? In the bathroom, Fujio looked at her long legs and wiped them with a piece of tissue. She put on her school pants and glanced at the residue in the wastebasket. Since she wasn't sure if there were any on the bedsheets, she might as well leave these things in a more obvious way. Thinking of this, Fujio took a piece of tissue and stuffed it into her nose. After she felt that it was enough, she walked out of the bathroom. As soon as she walked out, she saw the man's deep eyes staring at the dirty bedsheets. His side profile was dangerous. Fujio walked over naturally and yawned lazily. Brother Imo, my nose is bleeding. Did it stain your clothes? Chinmo turned back, looking at the youngster's slightly curled silver hair and that innocent face. He then noticed that there was a piece of tissue stuffed in his red nose. He frowned and pulled him over. Why is your nose bleeding? Maybe it was because he had just woken up, but the man's voice was deep and lingering. Fujio could actually hear the concern in his voice. She curled her thin lips and said, It's probably because of the exams and the esports competition, so I'm a little hot. Plus, the weather hasn't been good lately and the smog is so thick that it's like this. I just bled a lot and I couldn't stop it. I was afraid that Brother Imo would find it dirty. It had to be said that our Lord Gio's extremely lethal face looked exactly like whatever he pretended to be. You are my little brother. Mo's voice was very calm. He reached out his hand to press on the back of Fujio's head, as if he was going to stop the youngster's bleeding himself. Fujio raised her hand to block his view. What a joke. If the Almighty took a closer look at her, he would definitely know that she was lying. She knew better than anyone how hard it was to fool a man like this. Don't look dirty, the bleeding has stopped. Fujio covered her nose and smiled lightly. Brother Imo, don't worry. Imo listened to the youngster's low and muffled voice and suddenly felt that he wasn't a good brother. He had already said that he would take good care of him, but such a situation still happened. Fujio didn't know what the Almighty was thinking, but no matter what, the bloodstain incident was finally explained. But for the next 3 days, it was best for her to stay away from the Almighty. Her body was on the cold side, so it wasn't easy for her to move around when she was on her period. Chapter 180. The pain in her lower abdomen was still there, but no one could detect the change in Fujio no matter who looked at her. Just like Imo said, people like Fujio were the most difficult to understand. During breakfast there was a big plate of fruits on the table and most of them were pears. Qin Xiaodong leaned over and whispered to her, "Young Master Qin had these delivered directly from the hotel. He said that young master is suffering from internal heat, so eat more of these." He swore he didn't think too much. But what happened last night that made young master suffer from internal heat? Fujio raised her eyebrows and looked at the fruit plate in front of her. Pears were cool. All women knew that this kind of fruit was the worst thing to eat during menstruation. Fujio didn't even dare to drink cold water during this period, let alone eat pears. But this time Fujio pinched a piece with a smile and put it in her mouth. Not bad, it's delicious. Thank you, Brother Imo. Qin Imo retracted his gaze from the young man's face and asked someone to bring up another bowl of soup. The effect of the soup was the same. All the effects were to reduce internal heat and remove the haze. There were lilies in the soup, so Fujio really didn't want to drink it. But with the Almighty's cleverness, it wasn't as if he didn't realize it and he would react later. So she had to put on a show. Fujio raised her head and drank the cold soup. Qin Imo watched the young man finish drinking, so he could see Fujio's hesitation. He raised his eyebrows. You don't like lilies? I rarely eat them. Fujio curled her lips. I'm a picky eater. Qin Imo nodded, his voice calm. The rebellious phase of youth. Fujio. What did this have to do with rebellious youth? After eating the snow pear and drinking the lily soup, her eyes became much brighter, and she wasn't afraid of the haze anymore. But her lower abdomen was so painful that she didn't want to move at all. This was also what she couldn't let the Almighty find out. Plus, there was a physics class in the morning. If the teacher didn't take attendance, it might affect the results of this monthly test. After breakfast, Fujio stood up with one hand in her school uniform pocket. She smiled faintly and she didn't look any different. Qin Imo took her to school, and before he left he told the driver, "Bring the fruit plate and cold soup to young Master Jio again at noon." Yes. The driver nodded. Fujio listened on the side. She had already decided to give away the lunch that the Almighty had given her. She absolutely could not touch those two things again. She was in so much pain right now. Before her lips turned completely pale, Fujio pushed the car door open and got out. She waved at Qin Imo and waited until the car behind her disappeared completely. Only then did Fujio stretch out her hand to cover her stomach. Her silver hair hung down, covering her beautiful eyes. Because it was done through the school uniform jacket, many people thought that the young man was having a stomachache. However, the young man's back was still very handsome, and the way he carried his school bag on one shoulder made many girls want to go up and talk to His Highness Jio. However, it was obvious. Fujio wasn't in a good mood today. After she entered the classroom, she put on her school uniform's hood and laid on the desk at the back, revealing only the side of her extremely pale face. A few girls glanced behind them. Is Highness Jio sick? I think so. Chapter 181. Why don't we do it today? Anyway, young Master Fu said that as long as we bring that arrogant pervert to him, he will give us a lot of benefits. Think about it, how disgusting that pervert is. Not only does he like men, but he sits at the same table with that fat pig. His grades are terrible and he's pulling down the average score of our class. When he walks, he doesn't seem to care about us at all. It's so funny. Why doesn't he take a look at what he used to be like? How dare he flirt in front of us? The person who spoke had been holding a grudge against Fujio for a long time. Now that there was a chance, he would of course incite others to do it. He couldn't wait to see Fujio kneel on the ground and beg for mercy. She dared to kick him in the classroom in front of so many people. She was simply courting death. Alright, we'll listen to you. After the physics class is over and the people in front of the classroom have left, I'll block the back door and you guys block the front door. This time, we'll let him have a taste of what it means to never return. Just like that, a premeditated plan was quietly born. No one knew that in the classroom, a few people had already decided to plan a nasty kidnapping. Fujio only felt uncomfortable. Every girl knew what it felt like to have her period. Her lower body was moist. She really wanted to go to the bathroom, but it wasn't safe for her to go there in this state. Plus, she was really in pain and tired. Soon, her forehead was covered in a thin layer of sweat. During this time, Shui Yaoyao came to the back of the classroom. Seeing Fujio's restless sleep, she thought of a way to get some hot water for her. When Fujio raised her head, the corner of her mouth was still curled up. Because she had just woken up, her voice was a little hoarse, deep and pleasant. What's wrong? He looked very handsome. Because of his illness, the young man's skin was even whiter, which made him look like a handsome prince in distress. It was heart-wrenching. Perhaps only the young man could still look so good in this state. Your Highness Jiu, if you really don't feel well, why don't you lie down in the infirmary for a while and let the doctor take a look? Shui Yaoyao said worriedly. Fujio shook her head. I'm fine. She can't see the school doctor in this state. It will be easy for others to notice. Then drink some hot water first? Shui Yaoyao knows that no one can change the young man's mind. Fujio took the hot water and said with a smile, "Thank you." It was probably because of the hot water. Although his stomach still hurt, at least he didn't feel cold. It was just that her body was extremely tired. Fujio sat in the back and fell into a half-awake state again. She finally made it to the 4th period of physics class. No matter how uncomfortable she felt during this class, she couldn't fall asleep. She carelessly supported the side of her face with her left hand, and her right hand was under the desk, pressing a book against her stomach. It was impossible to tell why she was in pain from her pale side profile. The physics teacher's view of Fujio was the same as usual. In fact, this person was the same whether she studied or not, and she didn't expect her to get good grades. Chapter 182. Physics class was very difficult for Fujio. Even though she had put a layer of paper on her, the dampness was still very obvious. But she still remembered what the physics teacher said. At least she marked out the range so that the Almighty could help her guess the questions. But the more time passed, the more Fujio's stomach hurt. She had no choice but to lie back on the desk. In a daze, she fell asleep again. The physics teacher didn't call Fujio. Just like that, the class was over for lunch break. Shui Yaoyao looked at the young man, took out the money from her bag and ran downstairs. She wanted to buy some medicine for Fujio's stomach pain and bring back some food for Fujio to eat while she was at it. A few girls looked back at Fujio a few times, and only left after they were sure that the young man was only asleep. It was lunch break after all. There were still 2 hours before the afternoon class, and most of the students in the classroom went to the canteen. There were also 2 or 3 students who loved to study. They buried their heads in the classroom and did the test papers. After all, the monthly test was coming. One more test paper meant one more mark. If they could ask their classmates to bring food, they would try their best to do so. This way they could save time. But today, these 2 or 3 students were forced out by a group of guys with their eyes. The leader closed the front door of the classroom, looked at Fujio, who was the only one left in the classroom, and winked at the people around him. Fujio was still lying on the desk. Her silver hair fell down and only her white chin could be seen. Fujio was probably very sensitive to danger, and she suddenly opened her bright eyes. When she saw the pair of Nike sneakers in front of her, Fujio's left hand paused on the desk. She looked up at the people in front of her and slowly straightened her back. As she stood up, her eyes didn't forget to look at the back door. Her lower body was very uncomfortable, but her mind was extremely clear, and it even automatically formed an analysis. There were a total of 6 people in the classroom. There were 2 at the front door, 2 at the back door, and 2 holding wooden sticks. Their eyes were fixed on her, and the wooden sticks kept hitting her palms. It was obvious that they were here for revenge. And it was an organized and premeditated revenge. This matter was by no means simple. Fujio narrowed her eyes and curled up the corner of her mouth. She looked at the person at the front. Even though his lips were pale, he didn't seem embarrassed at all. Instead, he put one hand in his pocket and smiled wickedly. What? Lu Zongming, was it not enough that I kicked you that day? You? Go to hell, you perverted gay. The boy named Lu Zongming seemed to have been provoked. He raised the wooden stick in his hand and swung it at Fujio. But what he didn't expect was that the moment the stick landed, Fujio dodged and raised her leg, kicking hard on his knee. Lu Zongming was in so much pain that his face turned pale. In an instant he knelt on the ground. The surrounding people were all dumbfounded. "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and do it." Lu Zongming hugged his knees, gritted his teeth and growled, "Think about the benefits young Master Fu has given us." Young Master Fu? Even though she was extremely uncomfortable, Fujio didn't let go of this very important piece of information. It turned out that the illegitimate son was the main culprit. Fujio bent down and dodged another incoming stick. Chapter 183. Thinking of this, Fujio glanced at the back door. After seeing Fujio's gaze, Lu Zongming quickly shouted at the two people at the back door, "This perverted gay wants to run, lock the door." But he didn't expect that Fujio didn't run to the back door. Instead, she picked up the broom in her hand and used the inertia of her body to whip two people in the right ribs. It was so painful that the two of them screamed out loud. The remaining four on the side swung their wooden sticks at Fujio. But at this moment, Fujio turned around and jumped onto the window next to her. She was so fast that it was as if a gust of wind had blown past her. When she jumped down, she didn't forget to push the wooden table back, and she slammed into the person who was following closely behind her. Then Fujio braked hard with her right heel and tapped on the ground. Her white school uniform was like a pair of wings that spread out, making the young man look more than just handsome. Class 1's classroom was on the first floor, so it wasn't hard to jump out of the window. But there weren't many people who could do it as beautifully as Fujio. Lu Zongming also wanted to jump out of the window, but he was too strong, so he was squeezed by the window. He stared at Fujio outside the window, his heart burning with anger. F***CK. They had sent 7 people, but not only did they not gain the upper hand, but they were also beaten up to this state. Lu Zongming looked back and saw that he was half limping. The others were lying on the ground in disarray, and the pain was unbearable. That gay. How could he be so good at fighting? Wasn't he not feeling well today? Fujio was indeed in pain. Not only was she sweating profusely from the pain in her abdomen, but because of her movements just now, waves of coldness swept through her entire body. And she was 100% sure that her school uniform pants were really dirty. Fujio touched her back and opened her hands. They were all sticky to the touch. Any girl would know what this meant. But she, who had just jumped out of the back window, didn't notice that someone was standing behind her. This person had witnessed the whole process, including the scene where Fujio was surrounded, and the large pool of blood on the back of Fujio's pants. This person was none other than Shui Yaoyao, who had bought the stomach medicine for Fujio. She stood there, staring at the smear of red, and could not help but be stunned. That kind of place was definitely not the place to be injured. They had always thought that Highness Jiu was pressing his stomach because of a stomachache. Now Shui Yaoyao thought she finally knew why His Highness Jiu was lying on the table like that, plus His Highness Jiu's refusal to go to the infirmary. Many details added together, it seemed more and more like an answer. But no matter how much he knew, it couldn't compare to a girl's understanding of a girl. Some things, as long as it was a girl, they would understand at first sight. His Highness Jiu, Shui Yaoyao couldn't say the shocking answer. The bowl of noodle soup in her hand fell to the ground. After hearing the noise, Fujio quickly turned around, and her thin eyes met Shui Yaoyao's shocked face. Shui Yaoyao looked at the young man in front of her. He was still so handsome, so clean and handsome that people couldn't look at him directly. He had a habit of never zipping up his school uniform. Chapter 184. He wasn't him but her. Even Shui Yaoyao's fingers were trembling. Her pupils shook and she murmured, "Your Highness Jiu." Fujio didn't panic at all. Instead, she smiled at Shui Yaoyao and walked to her. She took out a piece of tissue and wiped her scalded fingers. Her thin lips were pale, but her voice was still smiling. "Next time you play games, you have to take care of your fingers. Don't forget, we still need to dominate the gaming contest." Shui Yaoyao really didn't know what to say. Such a handsome and carefree person really didn't look like a normal girl. If she hadn't seen that scene just now, even if there was a little blood on His Highness Jiu, she wouldn't have thought that way. She wouldn't even dare to guess that Fujio was a girl. Fujio reached out and tucked Shui Yaoyao's messy black hair behind her ear. She said in a low voice, "Can you keep this a secret for me?" Shui Yaoyao looked up and saw the young man looking down at her. His side profile was still handsome and gentle, but probably because she wasn't feeling well, the silver hair in front of her forehead was already wet with sweat, revealing a sickly paleness. Even her eyes had lost their vitality, but they were still very bright, so bright that it made people's hearts palpitate. Shui Yaoyao nodded hard. She looked behind Fujio, took off her school jacket and handed it to Fujio. Seeing that the young man was still looking at her, Shui Yaoyao lowered her voice. Wrap this around your waist and no one will be able to tell. I'll hold your jacket for you. Thank you. Fujio smiled, but the corners of her mouth were still a little pale. She tied the sleeves of her school uniform around her waist, making her legs look even more slender, making her look even more handsome and devilish. Shui Yaoyao looked at her face. I put painkillers in the classroom as well as heat packs and I'll go get them for you. No need. Fujio grabbed her arm and looked behind her. It's not peaceful in the classroom. Shui Yaoyao saw the scene just now and of course she knew who the culprit was. It's all my fault. If it weren't for me, His Highness Jiao wouldn't have become enemies with Lu Zongming. It's not because of you. Fujio smiled, her lips turning whiter and whiter. They're here for me. I've been paid to get rid of this disaster. Shui Yaoyao was even more shocked. His Highness Jiao means that they were ordered by someone? A young boy in puberty couldn't swallow his anger and wanted to teach me a lesson. Plus, he didn't have a good heart. At this point, Fujio's eyes turned cold. You always play dirty tricks. That's why you came up with such a plan to ambush me at school. His afternoon class. Shui Yaoyao turned. I've already asked for the afternoon class. Fujio pressed her hand on her belly and smiled wickedly and dangerously. Of course it's not because of them. When I'm better, I'll deal with them slowly. XT Yaoyao looked at Fu's. And she. Fu Highness Shui. For a long time, she had enjoyed too much of His Highness Jiao's gentleness. The only thing she could do to repay His Highness Jiao was to choose silence when it was time to be silent. However, there was one thing that she had to confirm first in order to ensure that she would not expose herself. Chapter 185. Fujio laughed. If he knew about this, he would kill me. The Almighty doesn't like to interact with girls. Shui Yaoyao finally understood why the young man used to look at boys in a weird way. Everyone said he was gay, but he wasn't. He was supposed to like boys. But His Highness Jiao was different. Shui Yaoyao didn't know how to describe that feeling. It was like she had a new soul. But if young Master Qin didn't know now, she was worried that His Highness Jiao would be in danger when he found out. After all, the Qin family was too powerful in Jiang City. Almighty Qin didn't like to be cheated. Everyone in Jiang City knew this. His Highness Jiao was too bold. Shui Yaoyao thought about it. What about the time you changed on the court? I wasn't discovered. The Almighty is a neat freak. Fujio curled up her lips, which was very beautiful. I blew into his ear and he almost stuffed me into the trash can. Shui Yaoyao, was a man's ear supposed to be blown? So His Highness Jiao not only knew how to flirt with girls, but also Almighty Qin. Shui Yaoyao, who had a new understanding of Fujio, glanced at the young man beside her. At this time the young man had recovered some energy. He walked forward with a smile, and no one could tell that he was wearing the school uniform to cover his awkward position. It only made him look cooler and more handsome. Shui Yaoyao couldn't help but wonder what kind of man could subdue a girl like His Highness Jiao. Inexplicably, a noble figure appeared in Shui Yaoyao's mind. If it was Almighty Qin, that would be very interesting. Fujio didn't know what Shui Yaoyao was imagining. She only knew that Shui Yaoyao was smiling happily. She raised her eyebrows. What's wrong? Nothing. It was better not to tell His Highness Jiao about this. After all, it was just her imagination. The after effect of her period was that Fujio slept the entire afternoon at home. After school, Qin Xiaodong pushed the door open several times, but all he saw was the bulging quilt in the bedroom and the young man's exposed silver hair. Even he didn't know what happened to Fujio. He just thought that his young master was too tired from playing games. On the other side, Lu Zongming's knee was still hurting, and he was even limping when he walked. The people around him were all badly battered. Ming, how are we going to explain this to young Master Fu? We can't possibly say that we didn't even beat that perverted trash. Can I still get paid that way? Lu Zongming was infuriated. Use your brain and think about it. If this gets out, how are we going to show our faces in number 1 middle school? Isn't it embarrassing? Then what do you think we should say? That person was also anxious. This matter was more than embarrassing. If the girls knew about it, they would laugh to death. Lu Zongming narrowed his eyes. Then he took out his phone from his pocket and called Fu Shiming. After Fu Shiming saw the call, the corners of his mouth curled up with a hint of pride. Is it done? Chapter 186. After Fu Ximing heard Lu Zongming's words, he laughed and said with complete contempt, "That sounds like something that trash would do. That guy has always been timid, so there's no need to kidnap him. You guys deal with him as you see fit. Sooner or later he will return to school. When that time comes, I think you know what to do." "Yes." Lu Zongming agreed verbally, but his expression was unnatural. He understood what young Master Fu meant. He wanted him to keep an eye on Fu Jiao and cause her trouble when the time came. It would be best if he could beat her up until she ran away like she did today. But what he said on the phone was not the truth. However, he couldn't afford to offend young Master Fu, so he had no choice but to bluff his way through. Fu Ximing still didn't know what was going on. After hanging up, he waved his phone at the team behind him. "Did you hear that? That trash is a coward. Young Master Fu has a way." The members of the battle team all started laughing, their voices ear-piercing. "If this goes on, that upstart will definitely be killed. Who asked him to provoke so many people? Why did he have to provoke us? Did he really think he was a capable person? All right, let's not talk about him anymore. It's a waste of time. Think about the team strategy. This time, we've cancelled the internal selection, and even young Master Fu can participate in the competition. I suggest giving the position of captain to young Master Fu. This is a good suggestion." I agree. With young Master Fu leading us in the esports selection contest, who would dare to fight for first place with us? Fu Ximing looked at the people around him as if he had already won. His voice was very calm. "It's just a small selection contest. Don't worry, I'm sure I'll get first place." As his voice fell, there was a burst of jubilation in the company. Fu Zhongyi and his friends from the media happened to pass by. Looking at his son, he was full of pride. "You heard it too. Looks like Ximing is determined to get it. I heard that young Master Fu still has a secret move that he hasn't announced yet. President Fu, what kind of secret move is it? Is it not convenient for you to reveal anything?" The media also wanted to dig out some valuable news. After all, the competition would start in 5 days. Fu Zhongyi smiled mysteriously and lowered his voice. "Do you know Spade Z?" It was night and the clouds were everywhere. At this time in Jiang City, people were wearing masks when they went out. The visibility was extremely low. Fu Jiao was still sleeping. This time it was a little better. Her face was exposed, but she was still in a deep sleep. She didn't even know that Qin Mo had come. "He's been sleeping since he came back?" Qin Mo glanced at the youngster on the bed and arched a brow at Qin Xiaodong, who was standing beside him. When Qin Xiaodong saw that young Master Qin was looking at him, he immediately said, "That's not it." During dinner, young Master woke up and ate a lot, but he went back to sleep after eating. "You mean his appetite is normal?" Qin Mo took another look at the youngster. Indeed, he didn't see anything on his face. However, because he had slept too well, his face was slightly pink. Qin Xiaodong grunted. He drank 3 bowls of hot soup, ate 2 bowls of rice, half a plate of dumplings, a lot of soy sauce beef and some organic cauliflower. Young Master usually eats this much, so it's normal. This time it was Secretary Liang who came with Qin Mo. After hearing what Qin Xiaodong said, the corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. Such a big appetite is normal? But what worried him the most was his CEO. He went straight to the Fu house right after work. What was going on? Chapter 187. Qin Mo didn't care who was looking at him. He turned sideways, took off the black glove on his right hand, and put his palm on Fu Jiao's forehead. When the cold touch hit her, Fu Jiao moved back a little, but she didn't wake up. She just shrunk her handsome face even more. Her silver hair was still sticking out and she still looked noble. Qin Mo's eyes darkened, and he pressed the quilt down again. Secretary Liang was very confused. Since when did their CEO learn to take care of people like this? There was no problem with the temperature and the surface of the body was normal, so it wasn't a cold or a fever. It was probably because of the intense studying recently, and the young man's physical strength couldn't take it. He was still growing and some things didn't need to be perfect. Thinking of this, Qin Mo took his hand back. He tore up the fill-in-the-blanks that he had prepared for the young man today and threw them into the trash can. Although full marks were important, his little brother didn't need full marks. He could afford it anyway as long as he didn't embarrass him too much. It was the first time Secretary Liang saw their CEO Qin tear up a piece of paper, and he couldn't help but be curious about what it was. Qin Mo glanced at him at this moment. His eyes were extremely cold. It made Secretary Liang's thoughts go back to normal. Qin Mo didn't say anything. His handsome face was as cold as ever, and his eyes were on Qin Xiaodong. Take good care of your young master. Yes. Qin Xiaodong really couldn't tell what he was feeling. From the moment Almighty Qin appeared, he felt like the world was a fantasy. Young Master Qin, he wouldn't really turn gay for his young master, right? Secretary Liang had the same feeling as Qin Xiaodong. For CEO Qin, who had an international conference in a while, what could be more important than business? But CEO Qin still came in person, and he stayed for more than 20 minutes. The young man was sleeping and the CEO was watching. That scene, it was as if he and that little housekeeper of the Fu family didn't exist. Should he tell Madam and Boss about this? It was such a difficult choice. Why did the CEO have to like him, the useless young master of the Fu family? Fu Jio was sleeping soundly, and she didn't know so many things had happened that night. She didn't know what it was like for other people to have their period, and she hated it the most. On one hand, it was the natural enemy of a cross-dressing woman. On the other hand, apart from the pain, she also wanted to sleep. The next day was still very uncomfortable. Fu Jio continued to ask for leave. She didn't even leave the bedroom, and she even locked the door from the inside, just to get rid of some blood evidence. It was not until dusk that she regained her energy and prepared a bowl of hot soup to drink. Qin Xiaodong stopped her sternly. Young master, tell me the truth. You and young Master Qin, are you two already together? What do you think? Fu Jio didn't answer him directly. Instead, she put her hands in her pockets and smiled. It's time to test your intelligence. Think about it carefully. Qin Xiaodong, why did he feel that the young master was treating him like a toy? How could he be so casual? Chapter 188. When Fu Jio heard this, she suddenly froze. Temperature measurement? Did Almighty Qin give me a thermometer? No, young Master Qin just touched your forehead, Qin Xiaodong said. Fu Jio raised her eyebrows and laughed. So it was just my forehead. It's because he's touching his forehead that's weird, okay? Young Master Qin's secretary was dumbfounded. Qin Xiaodong was still nagging. Young Master, do you know how complicated my feelings are right now? I'm happy for you, but I'm also worried for myself. How am I going to tell Madam that you and young Master Qin are together? No one can accept this, okay? Fu Jio listened to him indifferently. When he was almost done, she crooked her finger at Qin Xiaodong. Seeing this, Qin Xiaodong leaned over. Fu Jio reached out and patted his face. Xiaodong, your IQ is directly proportional to your height. You keep having such unrealistic dreams all day long. Be careful, Almighty Qin might find out about your thoughts and chop you up into dumplings, human meat filling. Qin Xiaodong was a bit confused at first, but after a while he realized that his young master not only attacked his IQ, but also his height. Young Master Qin just told him to take good care of his young master. Young Master Qin didn't need to be taken care of. He was either flirting with girls or on his way to flirt with girls, or he was bad-mouthing him. Moreover, he even thought that the way he talked just now was very handsome. He was hopeless. After rehydrating, Fu Jio slept in bed for the whole night. It wasn't until the day of the monthly exam that she put on the school uniform that had been washed a long time ago. She wore a black mask on her face, but she didn't go skateboarding. Jiang City was always foggy in the morning after winter. One could vaguely hear the sound of students playing, and the smell of pancakes permeated the air. Fu Jio purposely came early today. She had half a steaming hot jianbing in her mouth. She didn't enter the school and just stood at the entrance of the alley near the school gate. Her goal was clear. She would find whoever took the lead that day. Lu Zhongming, who was on the phone with his head down, didn't realize the danger at all. By the time he reacted, he had already been forcefully pulled into the alley at the side. Lu Zhongming paused after seeing the young man's face, and he wanted to curse. Fu Jio didn't waste time talking to him. She kicked him, and it almost took Lu Zhongming's life. This time the strength was different from before. This time Fu Jio used all her strength. Lu Zhongming rolled on the ground in pain. But Fu Jio was not moved at all. She looked indifferent. Lu Zhongming had never seen this in a high school student. But in the next second, the youngster laughed again. His long legs stepped on the metal box beside him, and he lowered his eyes. Haven't you always wanted to beat me up? Fight back. Fu Jio. Today is our monthly test. You can't hit people. Be careful, or the teacher will cancel your qualification for the monthly test. Lu Zhongming was so scared that he even threatened Qin Feng. Fu Jio just looked at him with a smile. It's 7:40 in the morning and the visibility here is extremely low. I'm wearing a mask. Even if you get beaten half to death later, who can prove that I did it? Just based on your own words? In fact, Qin Mo's analysis wasn't wrong. People like Fu Jiu had the characteristics of criminals. This was because she had already formed this action pattern long ago. She wanted to avoid all eyes and continue her hunt. Chapter 189. Yu. Lu Zongming was really scared. At that moment, the way Fu Jiu looked at him reminded him of an animal crawling in the dark. What Fu Jiu said was simply terrifying. Even if he was beaten to death, Fu Jiu wouldn't have to take any responsibility. Was he still a high school student? They always hit people whenever they wanted to. But this person hit someone and destroyed the evidence? After Lu Zongming figured this out, he didn't feel relieved. Instead, he felt a chill on the back of his neck. At this moment, he realized that no one would pass by this place, which meant that no one would save him. Fu Jiu was still smiling casually. Her long legs blocked Lu Zongming's only way out. It was because of those evil and handsome eyes that made people feel more oppressed. Lu Zongming couldn't even stand up. He stuttered and explained, "Fu Jiu, I am classmates. It's inevitable that there will be some friction between classmates. I'm sorry for surrounding you. I apologize. Anyway, we have an exam in a while. It's not good to be late." Fu Jiu heard his words and raised her pretty eyebrows. "You have a good attitude. But it's not a small friction between us." As she said this, she reached out her hand. Her silver hair moved slightly, and she directly pulled Lu Zongming's collar over. She pressed her handsome face down. "You are deliberately messing with me, aren't you? If you want me to let you go, I can. Take out your phone and call the person who instructed you to do so." Lu Zongming's eyes trembled. What instruction? Classmate Lu. Fu Jiu smiled slowly and patted his face with her left hand. "I don't have much patience. Are you going to call or not?" Lu Zongming didn't say anything. Fu Jiu didn't want to waste time with him. She bent her right knee and was about to beat him up again. Lu Zongming stretched out his hands and shouted anxiously, I'll call. Fu Jiu laughed and threw him against the wall. Lu Zongming knew that he couldn't escape. With Fu Jiu's attitude, if he didn't make this call, he would really beat him to death. In fact, Lu Zongming's body was in great pain. What surprised him was that after being beaten up like this, there was not a single trace of blood on his body. However, his fingers that were pressed on the screen betrayed his current physical condition. He was in so much pain that he was trembling everywhere. On the other end of the phone, Fu Ximing was still wondering why Lu Zongming would call him at this time. He put the pencil case on the wooden table and pressed the button to answer the call. His voice was arrogant as usual. What's the matter? Young Master Fu. Lu Zongming's breath sounded shaky. Fu Ximing's brows furrowed. Where are you? Why are you talking like that? Lu Zongming was about to speak. Fu Jiu knocked on his wrist and spread out her left hand with a devilish smile, gesturing for him to give her the phone. Lu Zongming didn't dare to refuse. He realized that when Fu Jiu was angry, there was a natural coldness that made people afraid. Even though he was smiling, his eyes were as dark as the night, empty and full of hostility. Lu Zongming's hands were trembling as he placed the phone in Fu Jiu's palm. Chapter 190. When he heard that familiar voice, he felt a chill down his spine. Fu Ximing, who was standing in the classroom, froze. Why was Lu Zongming's phone in the hands of this trash? Fu Jiu was still laughing and her voice was deep and pleasant. Honestly, I'm really curious. Don't you feel like you're being slapped in the face when others call you young Master Fu? Your name isn't on the Fu family's genealogy. Oh, right, it should be said that even your mother didn't marry into the Fu family. It's a pity that after so many years of planning, she still has to live outside and be a mistress. You. Fu Jiu, who do you think you are? Who do you think your mother is? Our whole family came from the countryside. Dad didn't want your mother for a long time, but your mother still doesn't let go. Do you really think you're so great? You're just a prodigal son whose company is about to close down, and you still dare to clamor in front of me? Fu Ximing stood up in anger. His fingers paused and he gripped the carbon pen in his hand tightly. Fu Jiu, who do you think you are? Where does your confidence come from? Compared to Fu Ximing's exasperation, Fu Jiu's voice was much more languid. Fu Ximing, go back and tell Fu Zhongyi to return all his shares and assets. My mom will immediately kick him out. Let's get to the bottom of this. Who's the one holding on to whose things? Also, illegitimate son of Fu, if you want to fight, do it yourself. Isn't it funny to find someone else to do it for you? After saying that, Fu Jiu hung up the phone and threw it back into Lu Zongming's arms. She tilted her head and put on her mask, revealing the evil smile in her eyes. She casually put her hands in the pockets of her school uniform and slowly walked out of the alley. Her back view was very cool, as if she hadn't just beaten someone up, but fed a kitten by the roadside. Fu Ximing was so angry that his handsome face was also extremely cold. He wanted to say a few more words, but he found that the other party had already hung up the line. This made him even more intolerable, but when he called back again he had already changed people. Lu Zongming, who had just stood up, picked up the phone. "Young Master Fu. What the hell is going on?" Fu Ximing lowered his voice, and his eyes were frighteningly gloomy. "Why would that trash use your phone to call me? Didn't you say it was all settled?" Lu Zongming gritted his teeth in pain and said guiltily, Young Master Fu, it's not because of me, it's because of Fujio. I don't know where he learned how to do this, but he's so ruthless when he hits people. My leg was almost broken by his kicks, and that day, actually there were 7 or 8 of us, but we didn't surround him and we even had to rest for a few days." Enough. The more Fu Ximing listened, the more venomous his eyes became. Everyone knows how incompetent that pervert is. How could 7 or 8 people not be able to surround him? Don't talk about this nonsense. If you can't do it well, then you can't do it well. Young Master Fu, really? I'm not trying to shirk responsibility. This gay is really hard to deal with. Lu Zongming was still desperately trying to explain. Unfortunately, the proud and arrogant Fu Ximing didn't want to listen to him at all. Fu Ximing didn't expect that after he spent so much money to teach Fujio a lesson, in the end, it was the other party who called him. To Fu Ximing this was simply a harsh slap in the face. The burning sensation and anger on his face didn't subside even after he sat back in his seat. At the same time, the students from No. 1 middle school had already entered the exam hall one after another. Chapter 191. Every year at this time of the year, the students who played the game would pay special attention to the monthly test. The rules were not like their usual selves. Usually, the homeroom teacher didn't need to say anything and everyone would be there. No. 1 middle school had always had strict rules. Cheating is definitely not allowed. However, not being allowed was one thing. As students, they would still try their best to sneak a peek. There were policies from above and countermeasures from below. That was how things came to be. Other than the top students, the boys would usually find a reliable person to write the answer and send it to the group. After that, they would treat that person to a meal. Of course, this was also a risk. Everyone was busy with their own things and no one knew that Fujio had just gotten into a fight. The monthly test wasn't held in the same class. Usually, several classes would take the test together. Therefore, when Fujio walked into a new classroom according to her number, all the students seemed to freeze for a moment. Just because he was too handsome. The young man's tall and slender figure stood with his back to the light. His left hand was in the pocket of his school uniform. He had a head of silver hair and wore a mask on his face, revealing a pair of enchanting eyes. Who is that? Some girls had already turned around to ask. There were also a few people from Fujio's fan club, who felt their hearts tighten. It's Highness Jio. I didn't expect His Highness Jio to be in the same examination venue as me. Highness Jio? Don't you know him? He's the new school hunk that's been spreading like wildfire on the forum recently. The new school hunk? Forget it, a gay like him still needs to be verified. Moreover, our No. 1 high school doesn't just look at his face. He doesn't have any ability, yet he wants to be the school hunk? In any case, the support rate is not low. Just wait and see. After this exam, those brainless fans will be dumbfounded. In the end, they will still be last place. Not only is he last, he's also a nouveau riche, unlike his younger brother. His younger brother is a true genius, but what about him? He only knows how to eat, drink, and be merry. He's just waiting for death to come. The comments were mixed, but Fujio just tilted her head and took off her mask. She held her chin and winked at the girls who were still looking back at her and calling her Highness Jio. She smiled beautifully. Good. His Highness Jio is breaking the rules. The girls all felt very happy to have such benefits. This was how Fujio did things. She was only responsible for making the people who liked her happy. As for the people who didn't like her, they could do whatever they wanted. When the invigilator came in, he found that the classroom was a bit different. The girls in the front row looked like they were at a concert meeting with their idols. It wasn't until he saw Fujio in the back row that he realized that there was a handsome guy there. Alright, all of you remember your exam area number? The invigilator raised his hand and looked at his wrist. There's only 1 minute left before the exam. Those who have mistaken the exam venue, Please find your seat as soon as possible. We'll hand out the exam papers in 1 minute. The first test was English. As a hacker, English was her specialty. In addition, Fujio had been active on Fifth Avenue before, so she knew more than just English. The exam time was less than 2 hours and Fujio finished it in an hour. She was the first one to hand in her test paper. The invigilator didn't say anything after seeing the young man put the test paper on the table. Chapter 192. The other people who mocked Fujio had the same thought. They looked at each other, laughed mockingly, and then lowered their heads to continue with their papers. Since there was still a lot of time left, the invigilator had nothing to do, so he simply picked up the only test paper on the podium and started reading. He didn't expect that Fujio would get the first question right. The invigilator didn't care much. He treated it as a way to kill time and continued reading. She got the second question right? The third question was also correct. The fourth, the fifth, even the reading questions were correct. The more the invigilator read, the bigger his eyes became. His pupils shook violently, and even his face showed extreme shock and astonishment. All of them were correct? How was this possible? The candidates didn't know what happened to the invigilator, but he suddenly stood up. They thought that he had caught something, so the cheaters were scared out of their wits and immediately pulled their phones back. Who would have thought that the invigilator would just stand there and murmur, "Full marks, this must be a full marks." What full marks? What was the teacher talking about? The candidates were all dumbfounded. The good thing was that the invigilator was obviously not in the right state today, so they cheated and copied a few more questions. The exam lasted the entire day from morning to afternoon. This day might have been especially torturous for others, but for Fujio there was one good thing. She could go in and out of the bathroom freely during the exam. Anyway, she was always the first to teach the test paper. The last exam was physics, which was Fujio's only shortcoming. Compared to the other exams, she was much more serious about this one. The invigilator happened to be the one who taught Fujio and the others physics. She also saw Fujio, but for her, she only cared about the results of those good students, so she didn't pay much attention to the back. When the test papers were handed out, Fujio did the big questions first. She glanced at them and thought in her heart, "Awesome, my brother." All the questions were correctly answered by the Almighty. In the future exams she would worship the Almighty. This was much more useful than worshipping Buddha. Fujio curled up her lips and started to answer the questions with a carbon pen. The light outside shone on the young man's fair, almost transparent face through the glass. At that moment, one could almost see the tranquil gentleness of time. It was said that serious men were the most handsome. He didn't expect a serious young man to be even more handsome. The girl sitting next to Fujio couldn't help it anymore. After the teacher walked over, she pressed the silent button on her phone and secretly took a photo of His Highness Gyo. Fujio answered the questions very quickly, and when it came to the fill-in-the-blank questions, she felt that the knowledge was somehow familiar. An image of a supplementary lesson appeared in his mind. The man held his chin lazily and knocked her head with one hand. Even his voice was elegant and his expression was cold and indifferent. "You can't even remember such a simple formula. I really overestimated your IQ." Every time Fujio thought of the Almighty's face, she felt indignant. She bit her pen and continued writing. In order to prove her intelligence, she had to get it right. Chapter 193. Usually at this time, Fujio's class wouldn't be over yet. Today she handed in her test papers early, so she called baby phone. This time they didn't go to the internet cafe. Instead, they went directly to He Corporation. That's right, He Honghua's company. Since the monthly exams were over, there were only 3 days left before the esports competition. In 3 days' time, they had to decide who would represent them in the competition. Lord Gyo was going to take her team members to the company directly. He Honghua wasn't in the company. She had been running around everywhere recently, trying to find members to represent her company in the competition. She didn't know that Fujio had already found them for her and even formed a team. When Fujio walked into the He Corporation, the assistant who answered the phone immediately stood up, and her face instantly turned ugly. How could she look good? Every time this nouveau riche came, he would either smash things or yell at Boss He, throwing a tantrum like a young master. If she had a son like this, she would just strangle him to save her from the annoyance. But to the assistant's surprise, the young man hooked up his lips and smiled at her. His eyes were as bright as stars and even his breath smelled like sweets. "I brought someone to sign up. Sister Lee, please send me a list." The young man didn't stop when he said this. Instead, he put one hand in his pocket, walked forward casually with his long legs, and pushed open the office door. It was as if he was the boss of this company. The youngster, who had walked to the door, seemed to think that his assistant hadn't heard him. He turned around and raised his eyebrows. There was a hint of laughter in his voice, and his questioning tone was indescribably sexy. "Sister Lee?" The assistant paused and looked at that silver-haired young man again. After meeting his clear eyes, she couldn't help but nod. She must have been poisoned. Feng Shang watched from the side, thinking that another one was electrocuted by her idol. Fu Jiu didn't feel that her behavior was inappropriate at all. She sat down on the boss's chair, crossed her legs and took the schedule from He Honghua's desk. They were all about the participating players. Fu Jiu could imagine how much effort He Honghua had put into this competition just by looking at the form that had been crossed out over and over again. Everyone knew that He Honghua came from the countryside. What others didn't know was that He Honghua hadn't even gone to school. She had taught herself how to write. The handwriting on the form was even a little round and childish. Fu Jiu touched the form and compared it with the one her assistant had brought over. She raised her hand and wrote down 4 names. "What do you think?" After writing, she tilted her head and asked Feng Shang. Student Feng's eyes lit up. "Good. Qualifier 4 versus 4 official format." It wasn't until he saw this official registration form that Feng Shang felt that he had truly become a professional team member. "Idol, give our team a name." Fu Jiu raised her eyebrows. "Name. Can I take it?" "N?" After Feng Shang nodded, he said in a deep voice, If Idol can't think of a name, I can also think of one. For example, we can call ourselves the Xiao liqueur." Fu Jiu. What a strange sense of beauty. Chapter 194. The registration form was submitted electronically, and the system would automatically certify the team member's company. Any company that signed up would be stamped with a red stamp. He Honghua was sitting on the high-speed train back to Jiang City. She was worried about not having enough team members. She even thought about poaching people with money, but those who were good at games and had a bit of fame didn't want to join the He Corporation. Plus, some people were deliberately suppressing them. This made He Honghua unable to move an inch. There were still 3 days before the esports competition, but she didn't even have enough team members. Could she just accept her fate like this? He Honghua picked up her phone and refreshed the company's registration page. What she didn't expect was that when she refreshed the page, a red message popped up on the website. After seeing that message, He Honghua thought that there was something wrong with her eyes. She rubbed them with her chubby hands and looked again. It was still there. The words He Family Army seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, under the He Corporation's name, with the company's exclusive red stamp. It was reflected in He Honghua's eyes. He Honghua quickly clicked on that message. The team members were clearly visible. Shui Yao Yao, Feng Shang, Inwu Yao, Fu Jiu. After seeing the last name, He Honghua's pupils suddenly shook. She checked it several times to make sure that she wasn't mistaken. Moreover, there were photos and identity information of the team members. The young man in the photo was so handsome that he could even outshine the stars. Especially when he curled up his thin lips and looked at the camera, there was a hint of evilness in his eyes. If girls saw that, they would definitely scream uncontrollably. She didn't know why, but He Honghua's eyes were a little moist. Only the website company had the right to see the registration information of each company. This was for the fairness of the competition. The players all participated in the competition with their real names. They would only compete with their in-game names when they arrived at the venue. This was also to set up suspense so that it could trigger more heated discussions. So He Honghua didn't know that Fu Jiu was Spade Z. She was touched that her Jiu could stand up at this time. Even though her Jiu was a terrible gamer, she was simple in her thinking. As for the other 3, she didn't know where her Jiu found them to make up the numbers. But with this team, at least she still had the qualifications to register, and she wouldn't become a joke in the industry. Thinking of this, He Honghua smiled happily. Anyway, even if she lost, she still had her Jiu. He Honghua looked at her phone and smiled happily. Her eyes looked out of the window. Spade Z hadn't appeared yet, so the outcome was obvious. She probably didn't have any hope, but she still wanted to thank that unknown master for helping her when she was in the most difficult situation. She would make sure the He group would survive. Although she was uncultured and rude, she couldn't fall for her Jiu. He Honghua was a boorish person. There was no other reason other than to earn more money for Jiuhua. However, He Honghua would never have guessed that her Jiu was that Spade Z. After Fujio signed up, she played another round of games with Feng Shang. That day was the last time she logged into Spade Z's account before the competition, and nothing happened. After playing one round, Fujio gathered all her teammates for a meal. Any student could understand the feeling of finishing an exam. They felt relaxed and they wanted to have fun until dawn. 9 o'clock at night. Qin Mo, who was still commanding the battle in the Qin Club, glanced at his phone screen again. Chapter 195. Almost everyone in the team noticed their captain's action. It wasn't because they were observant. It was because this was the 5th time the captain looked at his phone screen. From 5:30 until now, whenever the captain was free, he would look at his phone. It was so strange. The cat-like young Coco saw everyone's curious expressions and quickly opened a small group. Do you guys want to know whose call the captain is waiting for? Of course. Whose? Coco, hurry up. If you tell me, Big Brother will help you get on the rankings. Coco held his coffee cup and chuckled. Other than Spade Z, who else could make our captain so worried? Spade Z. The team members were even more enthusiastic, and one by one they flooded the group. Coco sighed in a mature manner. Yes, Spade Z, let's count how many times Spade Z has stood captain up. Captain has never been this patient with me. You know I'm not patient with you, and you still say it out loud. The cold and deep voice entered his ears, and Coco froze instantly. Qin Mo put on his uniform jacket, and his casual tone revealed coldness. Barbecue for dinner. Bring Coco, let him watch. Coco lowered his head and bit the rabbit's ear. Captain, you're so cruel, why don't you use your side on Spade Z? Fatty patted his shoulder and comforted him. Coco, you really can't compare with Spade Z. His skills, his hand speed, that virus, it's rare in the country. Fatty was very excited when he talked about Spade Z, as if he was meeting his idol again. Coco. Fatty, are you sure you're not a die-hard fan of Spade Z? After Qin Mo walked out, he frowned. His slender white fingers moved and he directly dialed a number. But what he heard was a notification that the other party's phone was turned off. Qin Mo's eyes were filled with coldness. He thought the youngster would be the first to call him after the monthly test. Now it seemed that he was being overly sentimental. Overly sentimental? After thinking of this word, Qin Mo tilted his head and laughed quietly. He threw the phone aside and thought of several ways to discipline his brother. Among them, the most satisfying one was to cripple someone. Because of this, he made a special call to his former business partner and told him that he understood how he felt after his younger brother disobeyed him. The CEO who picked up the phone was a little confused. After hanging up, he was even more confused. Qin Mo didn't think there was anything wrong with his actions. It was more efficient to listen to the opinions of experienced people than to fumble around on his own. Unfortunately, no matter how the other party told him to be gentle, the most gentle way he could think of was to catch the youth and teach him a good lesson. At the very least, he had to let the youth know that even if he was in the rebellious phase of his youth, he still had to report to his elder brother wherever he went. Achoo. Fujio didn't know that she had provoked the Almighty again. After she relaxed, she threw herself onto the bed. Her wet silver hair fell down, revealing a handsome face that was sleeping soundly. The monthly exam was different from the midterm exam. The results would be out very quickly. The next day, as soon as the students arrived at school, they were greeted with the most apprehensive mood. The first lesson was English. From the light footsteps of the English teacher, one could tell that she was in a good mood. Chapter 196. All the students were guessing who the teacher would praise. Without a doubt, they were the top students sitting in the front row. Who would have thought? The English teacher said an unexpected name, Fujio. Not only was his English the best in class, but he was also one of the few students in the school who scored full marks. Full marks. In an instant, everyone turned to look at the youth in the last row. His eyes were filled with disbelief. Whether it was Jiang Feiyang or Lu Zhongming who was beaten up by Fujio before the exam, both of their eyes were trembling. The former was because no one in this class had ever scored higher than him. The latter was because if Fujio got full marks, wouldn't he be the last one? That's right, Lu Zhongming was the legendary second to last. None of this was the most important. The most important thing was, Fujio was ranked last, so how on earth did he get full marks? Everyone's eyes were filled with different emotions. Some were amazed, some were envious, and some were shocked. Of course, most of them were in disbelief. Fujio herself didn't feel anything. To her, it was fine as long as she could pass and didn't miss out on the esports competition. Of course, getting full marks was to make He Honghua happy. She couldn't always let people laugh at He Honghua, saying that her son was not only a perverted gay, but also a good-for-nothing who would only get the last place in exams. That kind of mockery was different from the Almighty's. The English teacher looked at the silver-haired young man who took the test paper away, and the more he looked, the more satisfied he was. This young man was the class treasure of their class. Not only was he good-looking, but he also had such good grades. Most importantly, Fujio's original English recitation of Jane Eyre, last time, had already captured the English teacher's heart, and he would definitely praise Fujio whenever he saw her. He had thought that one attack would be enough. The students in the class did not expect that the second attack would come back. Second period math class. Students, I'm really too happy today. Before I hand out the papers, I have to praise someone. All the students. Why does this sound so familiar? Fujio. The math teacher had a habit of bringing out his local accent whenever he got excited. Fujio is the most determined student I've ever seen. All the students. Perseverance? Teacher, are you sure you're talking about Fujio? That Fujio who always asked for leave? It's said that the hard work pays off. I'm most satisfied with Fujio's results in this monthly test. The math teacher waved the test paper, looking like a leader giving a speech. Full marks. Another full score. The students were stunned. They stared blankly at the silver-haired young man who went up the stage to take the test papers. He was so handsome that he was dazzling. The third period. The students didn't wait for the happy teacher to speak and directly said, "Teacher, just tell us, did someone in our class get full marks this time?" Full marks? The teacher burst into laughter. How is that possible? This is language. Writing a composition will deduct marks. Students, damn, that's right. How could I forget that writing an essay will result in a deduction of marks? However, I'm still very happy. Teacher must praise someone today. The students, teacher, did you discuss this beforehand? Can't you change your lines? Fujio, your composition is so good that I only deducted 1 mark. Students, what's the difference between that and full marks? On the day the results were announced, the students in the inferior classes suffered an unprecedented critical blow. Chapter 197. The teacher walked in with the test papers. Her face didn't look too good. Not only that, but there was an indescribable seriousness in her expression. Class representative, come up and hand out the test papers. After the physics teacher said this, she looked at the seat at the back and said in a cold tone, Fujio, come out with me. The students present were all dumbfounded by this completely opposite attitude. After all the teachers in front of them were praising Fujio, which completely hit them. But when it came to the physics teacher, the situation was like this. Was it because Fujio's grades were too bad? That couldn't be right. In the past, no matter how bad Fujio's grades were, the teacher would still be very calm. Everyone could see that she had given up on Fujio a long time ago. It seemed like she didn't care about Fujio's grades. But looking at the teacher's behavior today, it didn't seem like it was because of the grades. But if it wasn't because of the grades, then what was it? Fujio also raised her eyebrows. She put away her books and walked out of the classroom with her back straight. The physics teacher didn't say much. She walked all the way out without a trace of a smile on her face. She directly brought the young man into the grade office. Before Fujio walked in, she could hear the noise coming from inside. I don't believe that a last-place student like him can get such good grades. First place in the grade? The students in our Class A who went to the Olympiad only got full marks in 2 subjects. What about him? Full marks in 5 subjects. Let's not talk about anything else. Let's talk about his physics. How did he get full marks? Even their teacher Zhang said that Fujio's grades in physics couldn't be any worse, and that she couldn't even memorize a formula. But look at the result. Full marks? There was definitely something wrong here. The physics teacher paused for a moment before pushing the door open and walking in. Instantly the office quieted down. But the teacher's expressions didn't change at all. Everyone's faces showed that they weren't convinced. After seeing Fujio, he took a sip of water, but his eyes swept over Fujio with obvious disdain in his eyes. Stand there. The physics teacher sat down in her seat, let out a long sigh and said to Fujio, after what happened last time, the school has paid more attention to the treatment of students. If it's not something particularly important, we won't talk to the students. I can understand that everyone wants to get good grades, but the teachers aren't blind, and they have the basic judgment of every student. Now that all the class teachers are here, we all suspect that there's something wrong with your grades. Fujio, Can you tell us how you got your grades this time? I've just said that the school has paid a lot of attention to the treatment of students. If you admit your mistake this time, the school won't say that they don't want you. They'll give you a chance. Hearing this, Fujio, who had been silent all this time, opened her mouth. Her lips curled up into a cold smile. Admit your mistake this time? What's wrong with me taking a test? Fujio. Chapter 198. Compared to the exasperated teacher, Fujio's attitude was much calmer. She had one hand in her pocket, looking cool and handsome, and her voice was very cold. She only said 2 words to the teacher: tutoring. Tutoring? That physics teacher sneered. I don't know what tricks your mom used to know the content of the exam in advance. The school did not do a good job in this area, but everyone knows that it's impossible to go from knowing nothing to getting full marks in just 7 days. This is simply a fantasy. What kind of tutoring teacher can do that? If there were such tutoring teachers, what would we, the teachers, do for? As soon as the physics teacher finished speaking, the other teachers also sneered. If there were such tutoring teachers, I, Old Lee, would resign and let him teach at number 1 middle school. Exactly. If you want to lie, say something practical. What's the point of a lie that can be seen through so easily? Haha, our school should also investigate who was the one who sold these questions. Our dignified A class didn't even score as much as the last place. Who would believe this? That director wasn't too agitated. After all, last time's incident was too big, and he didn't want to take any more risks or responsibilities. How about this, Fujio? Call your parents here first. This matter has to be solved. Fujio's thin lips curled up even more and she lowered her voice. Solved? Oh. Are you going to fire all these teachers who slandered me? Fire? That teacher was amused. Fujio, Ms. Zhang is here and she knows your learning situation the best. Fine, you can say that we are slandering you, but are your teachers slandering you too? Ms. Zhang was the physics teacher in Fujio's class. She looked down on Fujio from the bottom of her heart, so when all the teachers came to her, she had no intention of protecting Fujio. She was different from the English teacher, and she didn't believe that Fujio could get full marks. Fujio, you either admit your mistake or call your parents here. Hearing that, Fujio's eyes narrowed completely. At that moment, her eyes seemed to be overflowing with a dark mist. The phone in her pocket had been vibrating since just now, but she didn't care. The teacher next to her was annoyed. Now, call your mom immediately. Fujio suddenly laughed and her eyes were cold. You don't have to call my mom for this kind of thing. As she spoke, she took out her phone, pressed the answer button and put it to her ear. Hello, brother Mo. Where are you? The man's voice sounded like a high-grade red wine that had been frozen in a refrigerator. Even through the phone, one could feel the chill that seeped out from it. Fujio's smile was still there and she said casually, I was called to the office by the teachers, so I didn't pick up the phone. They insisted that I cheated on the test and asked me to call my parents. I'm still dealing with it, but I'll call you back when I'm done. Sitting in the back seat of the Hummer, Mo's slender fingers paused and his eyes darkened. He slowly put the documents to the side and said in a low voice, Which office? I asked you which office. Fujio, age group office. Wait here. His words were neither cold nor indifferent, and it was impossible to tell whether he was happy or angry. Chapter 199. After Fujio hung up, she was still a little confused. Did the Almighty mean that he was coming? Seeing Fujio on the phone, the teachers were a little unwilling to let her go. After all, this was related to the school's ranking. Fujio, if you don't make a decision soon, all of us teachers will write a petition saying that number 1 middle school will not allow a person with bad conduct to be the top student in the school. Fujio put away her phone and played with it in her palm. She ignored them and just stood there with a smile. Every teacher was a little annoyed because Fujio looked at them as if they were a bunch of clowns. The physics teacher felt it the most. Just when she was about to say something, a graceful and slightly cold voice slowly sounded from the side of the door. Conduct problem? That voice wasn't loud, but it sounded like ice and snow. Only because it was so pleasant to the ears, it gave people a feeling of coldness that was as deep as an ancient well. Hearing that, almost everyone turned around to look. They saw a man standing against the light, wearing a pure black custom-made suit that successfully showed off his good figure. Graceful, luxurious, high above the masses. These were the words that people would instantly think of when they saw a man. Or maybe it wasn't just his figure. because his whole body seemed to emit a temperament of abstinence and sexiness. He just stood at the door of the office holding his phone casually, but his eyes were too deep. At that moment, all the light seemed to run into his eyes, like a revolving diamond. Just one glance was enough to sink in. After seeing the man, not only the teachers were all speechless. Even the headmaster stood up suddenly. "Young Master Qin, how do you have time to come here?" Qin Emo didn't talk to the headmaster, but walked to the youngster's side. He looked at Fujio's face as if he was confirming something. Fujio appropriately expressed her depression. Qin Mo's eyes turned cold. Was he being bullied? As the youngster's parent, he needed to have a good argument with the teacher. Of course, under normal circumstances, the result of Almighty Qin's theory was annihilation. "Young Master Qin, didn't the monthly exam just end? It's a shame that there was a student who cheated this year, but he refused to admit it and insisted that he was tutoring outside. Tell me, which tutor could teach a student from the bottom to a perfect score in just 7 days? This is complete nonsense, but he had evidence to back up his claims. It's really..." Qin Mo's face was full of smiles as he looked at Qin Emo. "Young Master Qin, didn't the monthly exam just end? It's a shame that there was actually a student who cheated this year, but he insisted that he was tutoring outside." Before the teachers could finish their sentence, Qin Emo interrupted them calmly. "Meh. The teachers are confused. Meh. What does that mean? I am his tutor." Speaking of this, Qin Emo smiled. That smile was different from the one Fujio had seen before. It was truly evil and bloodthirsty. As he spoke, he stretched out his left hand, and the bodyguard behind him immediately handed over a pile of paper. "Fujio, you're the one who's going to die." Qin Emo put the papers on the table, and his black gloves slid across the table. "These are the questions I helped him with these few days. You can all take a look." The moment Qin Emo said, "I am his tutor," the teachers all froze. Now that they saw the clear words on the paper, a layer of cold sweat appeared on their foreheads. Only now did they realize how cold young Master Qin was looking at them. Chapter 200. How could this be? Who would have thought that Fujio's tutor was young Master Qin? Regret was not enough to express how the teachers were feeling right now. Their faces were all red and they wanted to find a hole to hide in. This slap in the face was really embarrassing. Because everyone knew how good Qin Emo was, not because of his family background but because of his inhuman grades and IQ. Looking at those physics questions that had been suppressed, the grade director suddenly remembered that young Master Qin did ask him about the physics course not long ago, and he also mentioned the problem of male and female deskmates. At that time he always thought that young Master Qin did it for his girlfriend. Now it seemed, could it be for Fujio? Thinking of this, the grade director's eyes shook violently. They really screwed up today, and it was very likely that they had wrongly accused someone. The physics teacher in Fujio's class wanted to explain for the other teachers. Unfortunately, Almighty Qin was never a person who would give others a chance in this aspect. He took off the black glove on his left hand, lifted his eyelids and said indifferently, "I heard that the teachers wouldn't let it go until he called his parents over. Since we're done with the tutoring, let's talk about you guys slandering my little brother for cheating." Little brother? Everyone present was shocked again. When did this upstart Fujio become young Master Qin's little brother? Every teacher was speechless at that moment, and their throats felt like they were choked by something. Qin Emo raised his good-looking eyebrows. "What? You don't want to talk about it?" At this point, Qin Emo tilted his head and laughed. His voice was still graceful, but it was bone-chilling. "That's not up to you. My little brother is in the rebellious phase of adolescence. Psychologically speaking, this is the time when his mental endurance is at its weakest. As a teacher, if a student gets full marks, you don't praise him, but slander him indiscriminately. This will easily cast a shadow on him." Fujio, although she really shouldn't have interrupted at this time. But how did the Almighty know that she was in the rebellious phase of adolescence? Qin Emo didn't look at the young man's eye contact. Even if he did, he would think that the young man was being bullied. This was the first time he came to school as a parent, so of course he couldn't let things develop like this. He continued to say indifferently, "Director Lee, when did the teaching quality of number 1 middle school fall to this level? As a shareholder, how could I not know?" As soon as the year head heard the man call him out, he broke out in a cold sweat. Young Master Qin, this matter? Do you want to settle this privately or publicly?" Qin Emo didn't wait for him to finish. He glanced at the few teachers standing at the side. They seemed to be well-mannered. However, Every teacher knew in their hearts that regardless of whether this matter was settled privately or publicly, they would no longer be able to work in number 1 middle school. Especially teacher Zhang, who taught Fujio physics. The blood drained from her face rapidly, and her skin was as pale as a thin piece of paper. Young Master Qin, we just thought that a poor student wouldn't be able to do so well, so we wanted student Fujio to explain herself. We didn't mean to slander her. Chapter 201. Young Master Qin's question was like, do you want your left hand chopped off or your right hand chopped off? No matter which hand he chopped off, it was the same as chopping off the hand. There was no difference. Can't choose? Qin Imo retracted his gaze and said faintly, then there's no need to choose. Teacher Li, remove these people's teacher identities and record them in the file. Was this public? The teachers were anxious. Once they were recorded in the file, not only would they not be able to teach at number 1 middle school, they wouldn't even be able to be teachers in the future. Young Master Qin, I choose private. Teacher Zhang's voice also changed. You see, I can satisfy any condition Fujio raises. The nature of this matter doesn't need to be recorded in the file. I misunderstood at the beginning. Teacher Zhang's words sounded like she was admitting her mistake, but in fact she didn't mean to apologize at all. She just kept repeating that it was a misunderstanding. Oh? You chose private? Qin Imo raised his eyes and glanced in her direction. He raised his voice slightly and said carelessly, then Teacher Zhang, please be prepared to go through the legal process. As Fujio's parent, I will sue you for slandering and ridiculing a student. Teacher Zhang was dumbfounded. She didn't expect that this was what young Master Qin meant by private. Her parents were both from the bureau. She didn't want to be recorded in the file because once she was recorded in the file, she couldn't be transferred to the administrative department as a teacher. But now, a teacher who had been sued by someone couldn't be a civil servant anymore. This time, Fujio really saw the Almighty's way of teaching people a lesson. It seemed that the Almighty was telling the truth when he said he would give in to her. It felt good to have a big brother to protect her. Thinking of this, Fujio raised her head and smiled at Qin Imo. Qin Imo didn't have time to deal with the youngster. The Almighty wouldn't stop until he finished dealing with him. Since he was the biggest shareholder, he had to have a proper meeting with this kind of problem. At the very least, he had to let some people know that his little brother wasn't someone anyone could bully. When the school leaders heard that young Master Qin was here, they all rushed into the small grade office. Fujio looked at the school leaders who were bald in front of their heads. She felt it was funny and couldn't help but curve her thin lips. Qin Imo took a moment to glance at the youngster. With a cold expression, he took a bag from the bodyguard and threw it to him. Fujio looked down and saw that it was dark chocolate imported from France. She ate it happily. She understood the look in the Almighty's eyes. He wanted her to wait here. Instead, Director Li, who had just been scolded, saw young Master Qin leading a few school leaders into the big office inside. She sneaked up to Fujio and said in a low voice, well, student Fujio, next week the school will have a very small parent-teacher conference, and the parents of the top 10 students in the monthly test will be praised. Will young Master Qin attend as your parent? Fujio held the chocolate in her mouth and said casually, probably not. Director Li muttered softly, but young Master Qin seems to really like being a parent. Hearing that, Fujio stopped what she was doing and thought about it. They couldn't help but look at each other, and the scene of young Master Qin attending the parent-teacher conference appeared in their minds at the same time. In the end, Director Li decisively gave up. I will immediately inform the grade to cancel this parent-teacher conference and change it to a letter format. Okay. Fujio also felt that as a school shareholder, the Almighty was indeed not suitable to attend the parent-teacher conference. Chapter 202. The school leaders were now experiencing what it meant to be a cold winter. Qin Imo sat on the leather chair with a calm expression on his face, but every word he said struck them straight in their hearts. The school leaders' hands were shaking when they left. From that day on, the school began to treat all students equally, regardless of whether they were good or bad. They would take care of those who needed to be disciplined, but they wouldn't discriminate against bad students. If any teacher still existed, they would be fired immediately. In the classroom, some students who didn't understand had already left. Only Shui Yaoyao was still waiting. After all, His Highness Zhou's bag was still there, so he would come back sooner or later. She was worried that the physics teacher called His Highness Zhou away. Could it be that there was something wrong with the monthly test? Everyone who participated in the esports competition knew that the results of this monthly test were very important to them. If something happened to His Highness Jiao, then their team, without His Highness Jiao the He family army, would no longer have any meaning. Shui Yaoyao thought of this and stood up. She wanted to go to the office to have a look. As soon as the wooden door opened, she saw the clean and handsome face of the young man. Shui Yaoyao's eyes lit up. His Highness Jiao, are you okay? The teacher called you. Before she could finish, she saw the man behind the young man and stopped abruptly. Almighty Qin? Why was he here? It wasn't hard to see the surprise on Shui Yaoyao's face. But Fu Jiao just smiled lightly. I'm fine. I came to get my bag. With that, Fu Jiao walked over, casually pulled her left hand, and threw the bag over her shoulder. She still had one hand in her trouser pocket. That posture was always very cool. After all, Shui Yaoyao knew Fu Jiao's gender. She felt a little guilty when she saw Almighty Qin, but after seeing the series of actions of His Highness Jiao, she felt that there was no need to feel guilty. His Highness Jiao's handsomeness was something that others couldn't learn. Almighty Qin probably wouldn't think that His Highness Jiao was a girl. Let's go together. Fu Jiao walked back and touched Shui Yaoyao's head. Brother Mo and I will send you back. She touched her head. Shui Yaoyao blushed. Even though she knew that His Highness Jiao was a girl, she couldn't help but be attracted by that tone. But as soon as she looked up, she saw Almighty Qin's cold and handsome face. His gaze swept over Highness Jiao's hand, and his thin lips seemed to be raised. But Shui Yaoyao felt the coldness in his smile, and her scalp went numb. She immediately said, Your Highness Jiao, you don't have to send me off. I also have an appointment with a classmate to eat ice, so I'll be leaving first. See you later. Almighty Qin's gaze was too terrifying. It was even more terrifying than before. Just because His Highness Jiao touched her head. Thinking of this, Shui Yaoyao couldn't help but look back. When she saw that godlike face, she immediately retracted her gaze. It was still too scary. Fu Jiao looked at Shui Yaoyao's back view in confusion, as if there was a devil chasing after her. She raised her pretty eyebrows in confusion. Qin Mo didn't make any unnecessary movements. He reached out and grabbed the back of the youngster's collar, calmly dragging the youngster into the car. Fortunately, it was late and there weren't many people in the school. Otherwise, the students would have seen the scene of the youngster being carried away like a sack by Qin Mo. It looked like a master disciplining a naughty kitten. Chapter 203. Only then did Fu Jiao realize that the Almighty had been drinking. Because the moment he got close to her, Qin Mo's breath brushed against her face, and the faint smell of red wine rushed over. Inexplicably he said, No matter how good the phone is, it's just a decoration in your hands. Fu Jiao said, with a blank expression. Qin Mo originally planned to discipline the young man, but after seeing Fu Jiao's face, the idea faded a lot. He was an open-minded brother. The rebellious period of youth needed the most care. Obviously, today was not the day to criticize the young man. Thinking of this, Qin Mo withdrew his gaze and ordered the driver, Go to Milky Way Soho. Milky Way Soho? The mall? Why were they going there? Fu Jiao couldn't keep up with the man's thoughts. Was the Almighty going to take her shopping? Since when did the Almighty's hobby become shopping? Fu Jiao arrived at Milky Way Soho with a stomach full of questions. Two equally handsome people appearing in a mall together always attracted the attention of the people around them with an unexpected heat. Especially among those two, one of the young men liked to smile very much. When he saw the girls who turned around to take pictures of him, he would always look sideways and smile. So handsome. Not only that, but most importantly, in the eyes of the Fujoshis, the scene of the handsome man holding the young man's wrist and walking forward was enough for them to imagine countless scenes. Qin Mo had long been used to screaming, so he didn't think about what those Fujoshis were screaming about. Fu Jiao heard them. She pointed at herself, then at Qin Mo and mouthed, Are we a good match? The girls were so excited that they were about to go crazy. Fu Jiao thought it was interesting. Looking at the man's black hair, she smiled. If the Almighty knew that others thought he was gay, his expression would definitely be very funny. Qin Mo stopped at a shop that specialized in buying candy. It was obviously inappropriate for him to appear here in a suit. The shop assistant who was greeting the customers was stunned for a moment, and then she laughed again. Sir, what would you like to order? Hearing the shop assistant's words, a few kids inside looked over at Almighty Qin and the others. Their round eyes were full of childishness and their big eyes were full of childishness. Yes, sir. Sir, are you here to buy candy as well? Maybe he bought it for his baby. Yes, it had to be. Sigh, another little friend is going to fall into an adult's sugar-coated bullet. Just like me, if I'm not obedient now, my dad will tell my mom that I eat sweets. He was the one who bought the sweets for me and told me not to tell my mom, saying that these are the little secrets of a man. In the end, I've been tricked. Me too. Who do you think this big brother is trying to trick? Children's conversations were always very cute. Moreover, it was the first time they saw such a cold big brother buying candy. All of them couldn't help but look over curiously. Oh no! The little radishes shrunk their heads. The pretty brother he's holding in his hand heard us. Fujio. You guys are speaking so loudly, it's really hard not to be heard. The shop assistant was so embarrassed that he wanted to ask again, Sir? Chapter 204. Lollipops. The shop assistant smiled brightly. Are you buying them for your kid? Fujio knew that the Almighty was buying them for her the moment she heard the flavor, and she was about to deny it. But the Almighty's cool and magnetic voice came over again, and he said slowly and elegantly, Yeah, I'm buying them for my kid. The Almighty definitely did it on purpose, or he wouldn't have glanced at her when he said the word, kid. The shop assistant had seen many adults buying candy for kids, but it was rare to see two as young as the two in front of her. She couldn't help but ask, Sir, how old is your kid? We have to choose candy according to his age, especially since you want a chocolate flavor. This kind of candy is not suitable for young kids. 17. After Chinemo spat out his age. Not only the shop assistant but also the kids in the shop were stunned. They asked with their eyes wide open, 17? How old is that? I'm 3 years old this year. 1 3-year-old is 3 years old. 2 3-year-olds are 6 years old. 3 3-year-olds are 9 years old. 4 3-year-olds? 4 3-year-olds? A little radish head was still counting with his fingers. In the end he became anxious. He puffed up his cheeks and stomped his feet. What if 4 3-year-olds aren't enough? 4 3-year-olds indeed weren't enough. It was really hard for kids. The shop assistant cleared his throat with difficulty as if he was making a final confirmation. Sir, did you say 17? Not 7? Yeah. After Chinemo responded, he pushed the young man forward and curled his thin lips. Although his behavior of eating candy is childish like a 7-year-old, his face is indeed 17. Fujio. She was sure that the Almighty came to buy candy just to mock her more vividly. The shop assistant saw the man's movement and realized that the candy was for the young man. He paused and smiled apologetically. Please wait a moment, I'll go get the candy for you. Hearing that, the little boy lowered his head as if he was having an important meeting. He said in a deep voice, Did you see that? That big brother is buying candy for the pretty brother in his hand. I saw it. I think it's a trap. I think it's a trap. It's definitely a trap. Should we tell beautiful brother not to take it? I don't think it's a good idea. Beautiful brother looks like he wants to eat it. So I can understand him. When I don't have any candy to eat, I have the same expression. Fujio. What's wrong with her expression? Wasn't he still handsome? Also, kids over there, when you whisper to each other, can you lower your volume a little? However, having a big bag of lollipops to eat was indeed a very happy thing. Moreover, this brand of chocolate was very pure. When mixed with sweets, it would create a wonderful taste. After Chinemo paid the bill, Fujio tore one out and put it in her mouth. With her beautiful silver hair and perfect nose, she looked much more obedient. Chinemo held his wallet and glanced sideways at the youngster. He pressed his furry head in satisfaction, his expression still noble and cold. You did well this time, but if I see you touching someone's head again, not only will these lollipops be thrown into the dustbin, no one in the entire Jiang city will sell you even half a lollipop. Do you understand what I mean? Chapter 205. That's what I said. This big brother is even more ruthless than my dad. He won't let anyone sell candy to that pretty big brother. It's so scary. Pretty big brother is so pitiful to be his baby. Yeah, so pitiful. The little radishes nodded in unison. The shop assistant was so embarrassed that she was about to explode. Fujio took the candy, supported herself with one hand and jumped in. Her movements were very handsome. She stood there with her long legs and winked at one of the little girls. She bent down and whispered, Let me tell you a secret. That big brother was drunk. I did all this to make him happy. By the way, look at me, I'm so big. How do I look like his baby? Drunk? The little radishes gathered together again and looked at Almighty Qin, who was standing outside the shop, as if they were looking at an inhuman being. Chinamo raised his eyebrows. He didn't hear Fujio's words, but he knew it was the youngster's doing. He reached out his left hand and dragged the youngster back. That shop assistant watched with her mouth wide open. She was amazed by the silver-haired youngster's skills. So cool. Was he really not a criminal police officer? You don't even let kids off. Qin Mo's voice was very cold. What a flirtatious guy. Fujio agreed. Brother Mo, don't you think those little radishes are very cute? Qin Mo didn't say anything. He just turned his handsome face sideways and took the youngster to the third floor. Fujio thought at first that the Almighty finally took her to a more normal floor. The second floor was filled with children's clothing. The third floor was very modern with all kinds of big brands. But why did the Almighty choose CK of all places? It was all underwear and it hurt her eyes. Go pick two. Chinamo raised his eyebrows at Fujio, looking very indifferent. Fujio. She was a girl, why would she buy men's underwear? I don't need this. Fujio raised the candy in her hand handsomely. I'm fine with these rewards. If Almighty Qin could accept rejection, he wouldn't be called Almighty Qin. Go pick. Don't always make yourself look soft and white. Fujio. Was the Almighty attacking her inner self instead of her grades? What's wrong with white? Fujio thought that this was a great color, and it should be loved by a germaphobe like the Almighty. Chinamo glanced sideways, glancing at the youngster. From a psychological point of view, the one at the bottom would like to wear white. Fujio. In such a situation, the shop assistant was still hesitating whether or not to interrupt. Chinamo had already raised his slender and fair fingers, pointing at a pair of pure black underwear hanging on the far right. That style, I want one. With that said, he turned sideways and glanced between Fujio's legs, curling his thin lips into a mocking smile. Give him the smallest size. Yes, sir. The shop assistant felt that the conversation was back to normal and quickly turned around to pack the packaging. Fujio felt that the way the Almighty looked at her was filled with humiliation towards humanity. A medium. The shop assistant paused and turned around, only to see the young man gently smiling at her. Sorry to trouble you, give me a medium size. This? The shop assistant didn't know who to listen to. Qin Mo's expression was indifferent. He didn't say much. Seeing this, the shop assistant naturally sided with the youngster. All right, please wait a moment. Chapter 206. Chinamo stood there, tall and slender, letting the young man tease his ear. He was dressed in a well-ironed suit, exuding an air of abstinence and indifference. Instead, it was the two girls standing outside who blushed. They really wanted to take pictures of these two handsome guys with their arms around each other's shoulders. Especially the scene of the young man standing on his tiptoes and curling his lips into a smile beside the man's ear. It was so pleasing to the eye that it made people's hearts beat faster. But just as they were about to raise their phones, the man suddenly made a move. He directly grabbed the young man's wrist and pressed him against the fitting room. His tall figure was pressed down and his waist was elongated. His voice was cold and deep. You want to prove that you're not small? Go in and take off your pants. Big brother will measure it for you. She didn't even have one, so how could she measure it? Fujio suddenly felt that she was in a dangerous situation. How could she forget that Almighty Qin was drunk today, so she couldn't flirt with him casually? Brother Mo, I was wrong. At this moment she had to retreat in order to advance. I shouldn't have blown air into your ear. Chinamo raised his eyebrows and looked at the young man's slightly depressed face. Finally, he let go of his hand and said coldly, Good that you know. The shop assistant softly said, Sir, the underwear has been wrapped for you. Is there anything else you two would like? Same style, large size. When Chinamo said this, he looked in Fujio's direction again with faint mockery. It was as if he was saying, Do you think you're not small when you're wearing a medium size? Fujio understood that expression. It was a little unnatural, which made her subconsciously want to look at a certain part of the Almighty's body. It was really a little embarrassing. Fujio hid something in her heart, so when the Almighty asked her what else she wanted, she casually pointed at a strangely shaped underwear. When did CK have something like this? And it had a pure black cat tail? Chinamo also noticed the underwear the young man was pointing at. His eyes paused for a moment and he said faintly, I really didn't know that you liked this kind of stuff. but I can't buy it for you. You're still in puberty and it's not good for your body to wear too tight, not to mention this kind. At this point, Qin Mo frowned as if he was thinking of an adjective. After thinking for a long time, he finally followed his heart. The shop assistant smiled and covered her mouth, as if she was trying to restrain her respect for the customer. This time, Fujio was really depressed. Shopping with the Almighty had caused her reputation to go down the drain. She had just casually pointed at him. However, the shop assistant didn't seem to think so. When she handed him the shopping bag, she lowered her voice and said gently, "I understand, handsome. Next time you can secretly buy it yourself. Since you're so handsome, I'll give you a 10% discount." Fujio. She really didn't want such a discount. She originally thought that she would be depressed all the way with the Almighty, but unexpectedly, the Almighty suddenly changed his attitude. He pointed at a pure white sweater and asked Fujio to try it on. Fujio also thought that the sweater was pretty good. It was almost winter, and it was more important to wear warm clothes, so she didn't reject it. The fitting room was of course locked. With her previous experience, Fujio was very insightful in this regard. Chapter 207. The workmanship and material of the sweater were very exquisite. Just by looking at it, it looked very soft. Not to mention the feeling of wearing it, it felt warm and comfortable. That pure snow-like color might be ruined if worn by someone else. But on Fujio, it only made the young man's snow-white skin and dark eyes look good. In addition to that silver hair and the black ear stud on her porcelain white left ear, she looked up and smiled, and the female shop assistant was stunned. So handsome. As for how handsome she was and how much Fujio suited the color white, people who hadn't seen it wouldn't know. It was as if she was born to be a clothes hanger. Even if it was a Korean version, it wouldn't drag on her. The sweater didn't have a collar and it showed off her fair collarbones. But Fujio had that devilish, bloodthirsty coolness about her, and it made people's hearts beat wildly when they saw it. Qin Mo, who was sitting on the sofa, heard the sound and looked over. When he saw the young man who was tidying his hair with his left hand, his deep eyes couldn't help but sink. Then he stood up and walked over to Fujio. His slender fingers moved and he smoothed the young man's fluffy silver hair. Fujio looked up and their eyes met. She smiled at Qin Mo, and it was as bright as the first melting of winter snow. That kind of warmth could be felt even on her fingertips. Qin Mo curled up the corner of his lips, and the girls next to him held their faces one by one like they were infatuated. How can someone be so handsome? A handsome couple. Did you see that? When that handsome guy tidied up the silver-haired young man's hair, my heart almost melted. His smile was so gentle, completely different from before. Don't say any more, my health bar is almost empty. The female shop assistant had been in the shop for a long time, and she had good eyesight. Seeing the man like this, she immediately said, "Actually, we have a bigger size for this sweater. It's very suitable for two brothers to wear together. Sir, would you like to buy one?" Hearing that, Qin Mo raised his good-looking eyebrows. He remembered his conversation with Bosley before. The rebellious young man always liked to get more attention. Although he didn't consider wearing a brother outfit, it was still a good way to get closer to him. Okay. Hearing this word, Fujio was somewhat surprised. After all, a person like the Almighty usually wore a suit or a uniform of dark colors. She didn't expect him to accept white? The sweater that Qin Mo wore was completely different from Fujio's. Even though they both looked handsome, Almighty Qin made people feel cold and noble, and the unique design of the wide sleeves made him look like a vampire aristocrat. One slap on the face was enough to make women go crazy. But when the young man was standing beside him, the girls couldn't help but get rid of that thought. Because compared to snatching the man over, she always felt that the two of them looked more sweet. With two equally outstanding people wearing the same clothes, it didn't take long for them to cause a sensation among the girls. Fortunately, Almighty Qin's actions were quick and didn't give the media a chance to take a picture of him. However, Secretary Liang, who had received orders to wait in the car, was completely stunned when he saw the clothes of the two people. What did he see? Love? Couple outfit? Chapter 208. Of course, Qin Mo also noticed Secretary Liang's gaze, so he glanced at him indifferently. That gaze was extremely cold. Secretary Liang shivered and swallowed the question in his mouth with difficulty. He looked at the shining white sweater in the rearview mirror. There would be an esports interview later. If CEO Qin appeared in front of everyone in this outfit, he would definitely attract a lot of attention. After all, CEO Qin had never dressed like this in front of others. After walking around for so long, Fujio was already hungry. Qin Imo heard the young man's stomach rumble, so he asked someone to buy a bunch of food and threw them all into the young man's arms. Which one do you want to eat? Pick one. Fujio was not a picky eater and she loved meat the most. She took a bite of the chicken burger from Burger King. Burgers paired with Coke were the best. Fujio's handsome face puffed up as she ate. Qin Imo frowned. Secretary Liang thought that CEO Qin would teach the young man not to eat in the car and to eat at home. After all, CEO Qin was a clean freak, and everyone in Jiang City knew about it. To his surprise, CEO Qin didn't say anything. Instead, he picked up a tissue and wiped the young man's mouth with disgust. Go to the Fu house first. Yes, young master. The driver heard Qin Mo's order and turned the car around. Fujio lifted the corner of her eyes and glanced at the man who was still working on documents. She thought that the Almighty hadn't eaten since just now, so she took out a French fry and put it on his lips. Qin Imo didn't eat this kind of junk food, but the young man was in his rebellious phase, so it was best not to reject him. He opened his mouth and took a bite. It tasted good, so he let the young man do whatever he wanted. Secretary Liang felt like he had been hit the hardest the whole time, until he sent the young man home. His CEO was still warning in a low voice, with his deep and charming eyes. Stop flirting with people. Take a day off. The esports competition is the day after tomorrow. I'll be on the top floor of the Qin group. Get the uniform and wait for you. Yes. This was the first time Fujio responded to Qin Imo. Not for anything else but because she felt that it was a very exciting thing to be teammates with a god. Secretary Liang didn't understand. He couldn't help but look back thinking, CEO, you don't look like you're teaching your brother. After the Hummer drove away, Fujio walked towards the villa. He Honghua sat at home and didn't know about Fujio's results. She glanced at the registration on the website again, but in her heart she was thinking that if it really didn't work out, she would voluntarily withdraw from the competition. Honghua was very clear about their grades. They could barely pass the rest of the exams, but they only scored a little more than 10 points in physics. She had never been to school and did not know what physics was. However, if this name list really appeared on the day of the esports competition and Gio was unable to participate due to his results, then Gio would be attacked even more. In the past, Honghua had also thought about letting the child get better grades, but she firmly believed that there were only so many years in a person's life. Now that Jujio was so obedient, she would let the child do whatever he wanted. To her surprise, before Honghua could make a decision, her home phone rang. It was a call from the school. Hello, Miss He? I am. Chapter 209. First in the whole grade. Honghua's face was full of indescribable shock. At that moment, she even suspected that there was something wrong with her ears. The phone was still ringing. Hello? Miss He? Are you still there? Miss He? Honghua came back to her senses and asked hesitantly, how many Fujios are there in number 1 middle school? Teacher, did you call the wrong number? How could that be? The teacher chuckled. There is only one Fujio in the whole school, and this is his home phone number. Honghua couldn't hold back her excitement. You mean my Gio really got first in the exam? Of course it's true. The results will be announced in the form of posters in the whole school tomorrow. The most important thing now is his application for the competition. This kind of extracurricular competition usually requires the consent of the parents. I called you this time mainly to talk to Miss He about this. I agree. Honghua's face was red, and she was so happy that even her tone changed. As long as the school doesn't have any problems, I will agree with whatever my Gio does. The teacher knew that Honghua spoiled her children, but she didn't know who spread this rumor to demonize Fujio's mother. In their eyes, Honghua became an unreasonable country girl. Not only was she uncultured, but she also thought that whatever their son did was right. This time, after a short phone call, the teacher realized that Honghua wasn't what she thought she was. Although this middle-aged woman wasn't cultured, she wasn't arrogant. Instead, she was very polite. Even if she spoiled her children, it was only under the school's permission. And who wouldn't spoil a child like Fujio? The teacher was also a mother. She was watching the previous interview when she called. Fujio's short words made her realize that this young man deserved to be spoiled by anyone. Fujio pushed the door open and saw Honghua's happy face. It was said that women were no different from children when they got older. This was especially true after He Honghua got close to her Jio. After seeing Fu Jio, she circled around Fu Jio like a little girl. Jio, I got a call from your school. The teacher praised you for a long time and said that I was good at teaching children. Dear Mrs. He, you've always been good at teaching children. Fu Jio pulled He Honghua over and sat down with a smile. Otherwise, how did I get such an excellent product? He Honghua heard this and smiled even sweeter. Yeah, that was the logic. Qin Xiaodong, who had just walked in, didn't know what was going on. He saw that his young master was coaxing his wife like a girlfriend. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Why did he always feel that after he woke up from the hospital, he became more and more like a monster? The exam papers had just been handed out today. Could it be that young master didn't do well on the exam, so he gave madam a warning in advance? Qin Xiaodong thought to himself, even if young master doesn't do well in the exam, it doesn't matter. If young master can be as sensible as he is now, I will follow young master for a lifetime. Chapter 210. Fu Jio sat on the sofa, still wearing her school uniform. She casually put one hand on the back of the sofa, looking devilishly handsome from head to toe. Who told you that I was worried about my mom knowing about my results? Qin Xiaodong's eyes lit up when he heard that. Did young master advance by 1 rank? That's great. What do you mean advance by 1 rank? He Honghua walked over with a round face. She couldn't hide the smile in her eyes. Arju got first place in the whole grade. First, in the whole grade. Qin Xiaodong was petrified. The first place in the whole grade who got full marks in all 5 subjects was their young master. What on earth did young master eat to become so powerful all of a sudden? Could it be because of young master Qin? It was said that the power of love was great. He didn't believe it before, but now that he saw his young master, he believed everything. That young master who didn't even know how to touch a computer now locked himself in his bedroom and played games all day. Not only that, but there were also physics exercises. When did young master study so obediently? All these changes were because of young master Qin. For the sake of madam's happiness, he would keep this secret to himself. But He Honghua wasn't worried about this. Instead, she asked, Jio, I saw the registration on the website system. Where did your team come from? Do they all know how to play games? Of course. Fu Jio chuckled. Mom, leave the competition to me. Just stay at home and rest. He Honghua thought that her Jio's definition of how to play games was different from hers. She was talking about a professional. Even if he wasn't a professional, he would at least be a god. But as long as Jio was happy, she could do whatever she wanted. He Honghua's biggest wish was to make her child happy. No matter what, at this moment, in a big hotel in the west of Jiang City, Fu Zhongyi specially held a small cocktail party to promote Fu Ximing. Other than the Fu family's business partners and school leaders, there were also Fu Ximing's friends from other teams. So naturally, the media would come after hearing the news. Young Master Fu, I heard that you are very confident about this esports selection contest? When the reporter was interviewing, he had a smile on his face. It was obvious that he was here to support Fu Ximing. Fu Ximing was wearing a pure white suit. His small face had a unique arrogance. Of course, I believe in my strength and I believe in the strength of our team even more. The esports selection contest is just a beginner's competition. Of course we will win. I believe that. The reporter said passionately, this time the Fu Corporation has recruited quite a number of almighties into the team. Even young Master Fu himself is a famous almighty in the game. As for who it is, I can't say yet. But overall, this is definitely an esports competition worth looking forward to. This was the industry. Apart from having some ability, one also needed to know how to package and create hype. Under his mother's influence, Fu Ximing had learned how to behave. Fu Zhongyi, on the other hand, looked at his proud youngest son and couldn't help but be delighted. When he received the guests, his face was full of smiles. The leaders of No. 1 middle school also walked over. Chapter 211. The school leader gave Fu Zhongyi enough face and said with a smile, Boss Fu, you really know how to educate your child. The results this time are so good that it's shocking. The school wanted to hold a parent-teacher conference, but we cancelled it because we were afraid that it would affect the students' studies. But Boss Fu, sometimes you should really go to the school and tell them how you raised your child. Fu Zhongyi heard that and thought that the school leader was praising his youngest son. His face became even more proud, but he still said modestly, "You flatter me. Shiming has been sensible since he was young. Whether it's in games or studies, he has never let me down. This child is so capable that even I, as his father, have benefited from it." Who knew that when the school leader heard this, he froze in an instant. He cleared his throat awkwardly and said, "Well, Boss Fu, I was talking about your eldest son, Fu Jiao." "Him?" Fu Zhongyi's expression was blank for a moment. After all, he never expected that the other party would bring up that useless loser. When Fu Ximing heard the name Fu Jiao, he wanted to skin the other party's bones. He stood there and laughed arrogantly. "So the director is talking about my big brother? Looks like my big brother is finally a little more sensible this time. He knows how to study. If the director is praising him like this, his results must be pretty good. He is in the bottom 20? The results will be announced tomorrow. But your big brother is much better than you think." The director's expression changed when he talked about Fu Jiao. "I've never seen such a smart student. He got full marks in all 5 subjects. I was the supervisor when he took the English exam, and he handed it in less than an hour. That English essay was so beautiful. As the top student in the whole grade except for young Master Qin, he didn't surpass anyone else. Boss Fu, your eldest son is too low-key. Otherwise he would have definitely become a popular figure in school. Even my daughter, who is in junior high, is crazy about him. She asks me to take her to see the latest school hunk every day. I don't know where these kids found this picture, but they said that they should look up to His Highness Jiao in the future. Not only must they be handsome, but they must also have a good character. Speaking of which, my daughter really became a lot more sensible after that. Is this the legendary power of idols?" "Ha ha, ha." The director was a straightforward person. He laughed out loud at the end, and he didn't notice that Fu Zhongyi and Fu Ximing's faces turned green after hearing his words. Especially Fu Ximing. He clenched his fists and his fingertips dug into his palms. He was clenching his fists tightly. The director's words really made him feel like someone had slapped him in the face. It was burning and embarrassing. Top student in the grade? That trash? How could it be? What power of idols? He knew better than anyone else what kind of a freak that was. He was a man himself, but when he saw someone taller and stronger than him, he couldn't move his eyes away. He would throw money around and show off his wealth. What right did such a good-for-nothing have to be a popular figure in the school? Fu Ximing narrowed his eyes. After the esports competition was over and he King destroyed He Honghua's stupid company, he would come back and teach that blind piece of trash a lesson. The next day, as soon as the poster was announced, all the students in number 1 middle school gathered around. Chapter 212. These people were a little pretentious. He always felt that if he excelled in his studies, he would look down on this and that. He even felt that he was very righteous. No matter how good Fu Jiao was or how handsome she was, if she didn't have good grades, they would still be against her. His expression was one of, "I just don't like you." Nobody actually cared whether they liked it or not. Everything was because they thought they were very important, so even when looking at the results, they would put on an arrogant face. After they saw their own results, they looked at the last place so that they could find another chance to mock those who liked Fu Jiao. But he couldn't find it. They counted from the back to the front, but they couldn't find the name that they thought would appear. Instead, when he raised his head, the most eye-catching thing was the youth's photo. That group of people's expressions changed. This year, the first place in the whole grade had an unbelievable result, and they had all heard about it from their teachers. But they didn't expect that the unbelievable person was actually Fu Jiao, the Fu Jiao that they thought was trash. In an instant, this news blew up in the school hunk selection thread. Who said that our Highness Jiao only has looks? Look at this score. Holy sh*T, how did you get full marks in your English test? What an amazing score. Number 1 middle school is really amazing. On the campus forum, there were not only students from the same school, but also students from other schools. Those who liked Fu Jiao were proud that His Highness Jiao had received more praises. However, there were still people who sneered. This kind of results might have been copied. What's there to be proud of? He still doesn't know anything. If I were to say that the school hunk should be Almighty Qin. Have you all forgotten about Almighty Qin? Almighty Qin is no longer on campus. At least find someone like Almighty Qin. What's so special about this Fu Jiao? Compared to Almighty Qin, it was like heaven and earth. To the one above, please don't compare the two. I like Almighty Qin too. I believe that with Almighty Qin's character, he wouldn't want to see anyone step on another person when they like him. Hee step on? Is Fujio worth stepping on? You even deleted my comment? It's useless even if I delete it. What I said is the truth. A gay wants to be the school hunk? Those who like Fujio are all crazy. If you ask me, only Fu Shiming from our class deserves the title of the new school hunk. Do you know how awesome he is? Not to mention his exam results, he was a god-level character and hero. Like Almighty Chin, he was a professional player. On the list of the esports selection contest this time, he was the captain of the team. Just the number of god-level players under him was uncountable. Only this kind of person is worthy of being the school hunk, okay? It's just that he's more low-key, unlike your Highness Gio, who just got a little better in the exam and still has to make it known everywhere. I just chuckle. Shui Yaoyao came to find Fujio today because she wanted His Highness Gio to take a look at the posts about her on the forum. It was supposed to be a happy thing, but she didn't expect that things would turn out this way. Even if the other party wanted to flatter Fu Shiming, there was no need to say such things about His Highness Gio, right? Her fingers moved angrily, and she was about to type a reply. Chapter 213. Shui Yaoyao looked up and stared blankly at the excessively handsome young man in front of her. Fujio chuckled and continued, "Don't forget, our goal is to dominate the entire selection contest." It was because of the young man's devilishly handsome attitude that made people's blood boil with excitement. In the beginning, she played hero because she wanted to find some friendliness and comfort in the game world that she couldn't find in real life. But now she not only found it but also learned to fight and be strong. This was a battlefield. If His Highness Gio was the king, then they were his loyal knights. Every one of us would tell ourselves that. If I were strong enough, I would face humiliation and ridicule, and I would say loudly, no. This competition was not just a simple game. They had to fight for their dignity. Would tomorrow, when people found out about His Highness Gio and Spade Z's identity, they wouldn't look at her in such a strange way? The night before the competition, there were bound to be people who couldn't sleep well. Shui Yaoyao was the first. After she finished a math problem, she forced herself to go to bed early, but she couldn't fall asleep no matter how hard she tossed and turned. Finally, she sat up and started to study the technique Fujio taught her. Feng Shang was also in the same state. He sat in front of the computer, but he didn't play any games. He just looked at the game character on the screen, and then he glanced sideways at the place on the calendar that was heavily circled with a red circle. Being a professional player. That was something he didn't even dare to dream of before. Feng Shang lowered his head and clenched the mouse in his hand. Without his glasses, he was really too handsome. People were still playing games in the internet cafe, and Hero's page was hanging high up on the screen. Someone knocked on the counter. Boss? Aye, boss. What are you doing? Give me a Coke. Yin Weiyao didn't say anything. With a cigarette in his mouth, he handed over the Coke. That person touched his chin and asked, "What's wrong with the boss today?" "I don't know. He looks different from usual, and I heard that the internet cafe will be locked at 10:30 today." "Damn? So early? I was going to pull an all-nighter. I've never seen an internet cafe that doesn't open at night. Our boss is so capricious." Yin Weiyao flicked the cigarette butt. "What are you talking about? Brats, pack up and get ready to close." "Are you really going to close the door?" "No, boss, uncle." "Where are you planning to go? Aren't you going to open the internet cafe?" Yin Weiyao paused, taking his jacket and flinging it over his shoulder. "Uncle, I'm going back to my old profession, playing in the professional league." Yin Weiyao walked out of the internet cafe after saying that, leaving behind a group of dumbfounded people. "Did you hear that? The boss said he was going to play in the professional league." Could the boss be joking? At his age, it's unlikely. It was too cold outside the internet cafe. Yin Weiyao started to regret running out on impulse. He wasn't young anymore. In the words of a child, his hand speed and eyesight had long since fallen behind in a professional team. Why was a 30-year-old uncle still jumping around? However, his body couldn't help but reignite that hot blood in his body. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.